If the parole board decides that you are fit to be released, that you will be released, and even then you will be subject to licence and recall if you breach the terms of your licence. David Boyd, stand up. For the murder of Nicky Allen on the 7th of October of 1992, the sentence of the court is one of life imprisonment. You will serve a term of 29 years, subject to the 366 days which you have spent on remand before consideration is given to your release by the parole board. If you take him down.
So there we have the sentencing from Mrs. Justice Lambert, quite exhaustive, very upsetting, of course, but she was explaining why she's had to go through all those sentencing considerations, because the case, of course, dates back to 1992. The sentencing then has to be addressed as to the case before 2002. So we have sex offender David Boyd, who's now 55, being sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 29 years. Mrs. Justice Lambert saying that the fact that he would maybe die in prison was not her consideration. No mitigating circumstances, she said, to remind you that Nicky Allen, who was 7 years old, was murdered by Boyd. He hit her with a brick across the head twice, fracturing her skull, and then stabbed her 37 times. The judge saying that the little girl had been taken by him to a cold, dark area in a building for sexual assault. And indications, of course, that Nicky's mother, Sharon Henderson, had told the court she'd fought ceaselessly to see justice done for Nicky. Boyd had remained at large while an innocent man, George Heron, stood trial for the murder and then was acquitted back in 1993. So he's now been taken down, David Boyd, to start serving a 29-year minimum sentence. More reaction on that to come. Stay with us here on GB News. Patrick Christys is next.
Yes, thank you, Mark. It's Patrick Christys here on GB News. I will be with you for the next 3 hours, but here is what's on the menu in the next 60 minutes. I'm going to be talking about this. A workman has finally snapped at Just Stop Oil. There's some, I think, quite hard-hitting video footage of this, but believe it or not, it was that ordinary man on his way to work, desperate to get there, who was the one that was detained by police. We can see a little bit of it now. He's just got out of his van, he's pushing them to one side, he's ripping their signs off them. The police are escorting this lot through the street, seem to take umbrage at that and get him lifted. What on earth is going on? What kind of country are we living in, ladies and gentlemen? Have the police got the priorities all wrong? In other news as well, we will be all over this. Mark White is on the scene of the search for Madeleine McCann. Any developments, we'll bring them to you straight away here on this show. In other news, we're also going to be talking about this. Rolf Harris has died. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, the disgraced paedophile former TV personality has passed away. I'll bring you the latest on all of that. And also this as well. Prince Harry has lost his appeal to try to be able to pay for police protection. It turns out that you can't buy our police force. So Prince Harry is officially a loser. And one final one as well. This has just dropped not so long ago. The government is going to clamp down on those students who want to bring their dependents over. It's ahead of those supposedly jaw-dropping net migration figures dropping on Thursday. Nigel Farage will be here on this show to talk about the big net migration lie. Patrick Christys on GB News. Get those emails coming in thick and fast. gbviews@gbnews.com. Remember, it's a new email address, not .co.uk, .com, so get them coming in to that address. I'll be talking about all sorts, but I do want your views, primarily, I think, on that workman, that ordinary bloke who's finally snapped and decided to push Just Stop Oil to one side. Look, is it too heavy-handed, or actually, is this something you think you're going to see a lot more of from the public unless the police clamp down on Just Stop Oil? Patrick Christys on GB News. Now it's the headlines.
Good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's 3 minutes past 3. I'm Tamsin Roberts. A former Met Police officer accused of failing to properly investigate Wayne Couzens over flashing incidents has been found guilty of gross misconduct. Samantha Lee was tasked to conduct an inquiry into the incidents in 2021. Couzens exposed himself to female members of staff at a restaurant in Kent weeks before he killed Sarah Everard. Samantha Lee was found to be dishonest, claiming the CCTV at the restaurant was deleted automatically. Sex offender David Boyd, who murdered 7-year-old Nikki Allen in 1992, has been sentenced to a minimum of 29 years in prison. The 55-year-old lured Nikki to a derelict warehouse in Sunderland's East End before stabbing her in the chest. He remained at large for over 30 years until he was convicted of murder earlier this month. Northumbria Police first prosecuted the wrong man, George Heron, who was cleared after a trial in 1993. Nikki's mother, Sharon Henderson, has fought since then for justice for Nikki. The German authorities leading the Madeleine McCann investigation say a major search is underway at a reservoir in Portugal after a tip-off was received. Dozens of Portuguese police and other specialists are searching an area 30 miles from where the 3-year-old went missing. The main suspect, Christian Bruckner, is facing sex offence charges in Germany and was in Portugal around the time Madeleine disappeared in 2007. 2 teenagers who died in a crash in Cardiff have been named locally as Kyrie Sullivan, who was 16, and 15-year-old Harvey Evans. A clean-up operation is still underway, and South Wales police are continuing their investigation into the crash. There was violent unrest in the wake of the fatal incident, in which police were pelted with missiles, including fireworks, and 2 cars were set alight. Friends of the boys say they were riding an electric scooter without helmets when they died. Some residents claimed they were being chased by officers at the time, but this has been denied by South Wales Police. Convicted paedophile Rolf Harris has died aged 93. The announcement was made this afternoon, but his death certificate says he died on the 10th of May of neck cancer and old age. The Australian-born artist and children's TV presenter was a family favourite for decades before he was convicted of 12 indecent assaults in 2014. Labour has accused the Prime Minister of dither and delay as he continues to consider whether to order an investigation into the Home Secretary's conduct. Suella Braverman is accused of breaching the ministerial code by asking civil servants to organise a private speed awareness course. She maintains nothing untoward took place, but the Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner says there are serious questions to be answered.
As Ministers knows, the Home Secretary has already admitted to breaching the ministerial code by using personal emails to share sensitive government information. So I ask the Minister today, how many strikes before she's out?
Paymaster General Jeremy Quinn says the Prime Minister is taking time to gather the facts.
The Prime Minister has met both the independent adviser and the Home Secretary and asked for further information. It is right that the Prime Minister, as the head of the Executive and the arbiter of the Ministerial Code, be allowed time to receive relevant information on this matter.
Overseas students will be banned from bringing dependents to the UK from next January. The ban, which attempts to bring down migration, won't include the students in postgraduate research programmes. International students also will not be able to switch out of the student route to work before completing their studies. The Duke of Sussex has lost his bid to legally challenge the Home Office's decision to block him from paying for police protection while he's in the UK. Prince Harry had wanted to foot the bill himself after being told he would no longer receive the same degree of protection as a working royal when visiting the country. The decision comes a week after Harry and Meghan say they were chased through New York at high speed by paparazzi. The Home Office says it welcomes the judgment, upholding the integrity of the protective security system. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, it's over to Patrick.
Yes, hello, everybody. Look, just a very quick recap of a story that was the tail end there of Mark Longhurst's show, which is that David Boyd, 55, has been sentenced to a minimum of 29 years in prison for the murder of Nikki Allen back in 1992. We just had the sentencing. We are possibly going to hear from the family of Nikki Allen. If that happens, we will, of course, go straight to that. But in the meantime, we'll crack on with the show. as planned. And I want to lead in on this workman, this ordinary man who has snapped, finally, at Just Stop Oil. Now, it's only a matter of time before a member of the public, in my view, seriously batters someone from Just Stop Oil. And it's about time the police started standing up for the common working man and woman, not doing everything they can to look after these eco-numpties. Today, a workman was detained after shoving slow-walking Just Stop Oil protesters. He was angry, apparently, because he couldn't get to work. Well, Just Stop Oil don't care about the working class. By the looks of things, they don't have jobs. They certainly weren't at work today, were they? Normal working-class people have a strong sense of right and wrong. They have a strong sense of morality, a strong sense of fairness and, well, common sense as well. They don't like to be messed around. Just Stop Oil are playing with fire, and so are the police. Mark my words, it is a matter of time before someone runs over a Just Stop Oil protester, and that would be a catastrophically awful thing. It is a matter of time before someone with a dying relative in their car does something that they go on to regret by, say, punching one of them in the face or something along those lines. And that is not the right thing to do. Of course it's not. It's wrong. But does anybody seriously disagree with me that it is a matter of time before something like this happens? This guy who shoved one of those idiots around shouldn't have been detained by police. He should have been thanked by every single person who wants to get to work on time, who wants to get up and get out to earn a crust, put food on the table for their family. It is a ridiculous world that we live in, where pillocks can just block traffic with a police escort, but when someone whose livelihood depends on them moving gives one a shove and he gets dragged off by police. I want to find out who that man was and buy him a pint. Just Stop Oil are cowards. It doesn't take any bravery to throw paint on things or glue yourself to something. Oh, you've got a little criminal record in Britain, have you? You're hard. Go to China. Do it over there. And they say no. They say there's no point because they get arrested over there. But that is a lie. And the truth is, in my view, that they're cowards. They would make much more of an international splash for their cause if they got detained by Chinese authorities and were extradited. They just don't do it because they haven't got the bottle. And they're much more comfortable mugging off the working-class Brits desperate to make a pound note in the middle of a cost of living crisis. Cowards. Well, that's what I think. GBViews at gbnews.com. Get your emails coming in thick and fast. I'm going to go straight to my guest now, and I am joined by Steve McNamara, who's the General Secretary of the Licensed Taxi Drivers Association. Steve, thank you very much. Your career, and many like you, relies on being able to get around the place, OK? What's your view on what we've just seen here, which is an individual detained after giving Just Stop Oil a shove?
Well, my members are frequently detained by the Stop Oil protesters. They're detained in the traffic, they're prevented from going about their business, their lawful business, they're prevented from helping keep London moving. Many of the people in the back of the cabs are, going to important meetings, they're going, places they need to be in a cab for and they need to get there. And the fact that half a dozen people or 10 or 12 people can block the traffic at will with a police escort just goes to show exactly what you said about how mad it's become. But I think the really worrying bit about the video there was the degree of force that the police showed with the van driver. I mean, handcuffing him, throwing him against the van, when all the guy was trying to do was get to work. I mean, it really was completely over the top. And I think it's symptomatic of the problems we've got with the police, particularly in London. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when it was a police force. Now I'm told it's a police service. I mean, I like to think of it more as a police farce, because that's exactly what we've got. It's exactly what we've seen now. And whilst this was going on this morning, the Met have launched their latest figures about how well they've done. And you're thinking, well, have they done really well on crime? No, they're not talking about that. Have they done really well with burglary or drugs or anything? No, they've managed to issue 650,000 speeding fines last year.
Brilliant.
And they're cheering it from the rooftops as if they've done something really clever. Up from, by the way, from 200,000 2 years ago. And they've been set a target of 1 million speeding fines this year. This is just London.
Oh, they're setting targets on that, are they?
The Mayor's set them a target of 1 million speeding fines.
How about turning Just Stop Oil into net zero?
No. That's much more important that we do the really useful stuff. Prosecuting people. Look, let me just give you an example. Scotland Yard, New Scotland Yard, overlooks Westminster Bridge. Every single day, you and I could go down there now. On Westminster Bridge, there's the three-card tricksters, doing the three-card tricks, ripping off the tourists. The pickpockets are going through their pockets. You can see it from the Commissioner's window. If he looks out of his window, he can watch it going on, and yet it goes on every day, all day. Meanwhile, a few hundred yards from there, a guy gets the loses his rag with people stopping him and going out. And they're all over him. They're throwing him against his car. And
this is the thing. Mark my words, and this is a terrible reality, but I'm convinced, ladies and gentlemen, this is a reality, OK? Because it's a matter of time before you've got someone with a partner having a stroke or in labour next to them or something terrible going on, or they've got to do it, or they know that their rent has gone up by X amount, or they can't pay their mortgage and they're on their way to do a bit of handyman work or a bit of decorating or something like that, and they need that money that day, and they can't afford the one-star review that someone will give them if they don't get there, and so they absolutely lose their rag. And it's not excusable, right? It is a shame that they should do that. They shouldn't do it, of course, but it's happening. It's going to happen at some point if the police don't step in here.
People are getting increasingly frustrated. I mean, driving in London, full stop, is just a frustration. Nobody does it unless they have to. And it's just making matters worse. And as I say, the problem is, the big picture, is the police have got their priorities wrong again. Instead of, trying to keep the traffic moving, trying to sort it out. I mean, all the guy did was push him. It's a common assault at worst. And the massive police overreaction is completely unjustified, completely unnecessary, and they picked on the wrong guy again.
Talking of picking on the wrong guy, aren't Just Stop Oil picking on the wrong people? This is, it would appear, the embodiment of your kind of working-class bloke, right? He's out there trying to earn himself a bit of a crust. I dare say, a lot of London cabbies, traditional London cabbies, good working-class individuals, and they seem to be the ones at the coalface of this.
Yeah, we're the ones who are suffering. It's not just us, it's everybody who moves around London, and they're just wandering aimlessly around holding Just Stop. And like you, I struggle to see... Look, if we actually look at what's going on, most people are sympathetic with the Green cause now, or to some extent or other. We all agree that something needs to be done. But reality, to stop using oil today, it's not going to happen. They're wasting their time. They're inconveniencing the wrong people.
And you have, I believe, anyway, a lot of London cabbies have moved to electric vehicles now, haven't they?
Well, indeed. 50% of our fleet now, 50% of London's fleet is now electric. We've got the cleanest cab fleet in the world, and the irony is they're stopping us in our electric cabs moving around. The other 50% are looking at buying electric cabs. They're £100,000 now, by the way, with a finance.
Right.
So we're looking at a massive investment. Many of the roads we can't move down now, as you know, with the LTNs, with the 20 mile an hour, with the speed cameras, with the Met targets. It's working against the agenda.
Thank you very much. I'm going to have to cut across you and just go thank you to Newcastle Crown Court, I believe, now, where we can hear from the family of Nikki Allen after David Boyd was, of course, sentenced for her murder. We can go now.
Sorry, my love, we'll take that side. Don't worry. Sharon, if we can ask you first, just your reaction to the sentence.
OK, ladies and gentlemen, we're just about to bring you a statement, I believe, from the family of Nikki Allen.
I've been campaigning for 31,
What's upset you most about today?
The law, the apologies that was said on the TV, not said to me face. And then finding out today that they were going to use the old law.
Sharon, would you have been more satisfied with 37 years is what the judge wanted to impose based on...
Satisfied? I would have been satisfied with life. This is a 7-year-old ban. When's anybody going to take crimes like this serious?
You still angry with the police, Sharon?
I am, definitely. They haven't done the jobs properly.
So you would have wanted a whole lifetime?
Or life sentence with no parole. And this is what's happening to families like me over and over again. And it's an injustice of everything.
Sharon, how hard was it to have to sit through all of that detail again?
I thought I'd been through trauma when I found out Nicky was murdered. This is just again.
Sharon, you've done very well. Stacey, can we ask for your reaction?
Not good enough, but it'll do for now.
You wanted more?
Well, there will be more, I think. But as I see it for now, we just need to take one step at a time. My mum's been through a lot.
But that 29-year sentence not enough for you?
You should never walk free again. how on earth could he walk free to harm another child?
You've lived without your sister all these years. It must have been hard.
Very.
What's it like here in details?
You just have to be strong. Just be there for my mum now.
Oh, Nicky's case wasn't took serious. Never asked. Never asked me.
Sorry, go on.
I'm absolutely devastated at the sentence. Absolutely devastated.
This is a statement I'm reading on behalf of Sharon.
Could you give us your name and your association and just a little closer to the microphone, please?
So my name's Harriet Wistrich. I'm a solicitor and the director of the Centre for Women's Justice.
And the spelling of Wistrich, please.
Wistrich. And I've known Sharon since 2006 when I started to try and help her in her incredible battle to get justice for Nicky. And I think we have to really recognise that if it wasn't for Sharon continuing to fight all these years, we wouldn't be here today. And she's fought the most incredible battle under the most awful circumstances. What we want to say is that this is not yet the end of her campaign for justice. Sharon demands that Northumbria Police are held accountable for the history.
OK, ladies and gentlemen, what you've just been watching and listening to there outside Newcastle Crown Court was a very, very brief but incredibly emotional interaction between the mother of Nicky Allen, Sharon, and some members of the press. She, from what I could make out there, clearly very distressed and not happy with the 29-year sentence, minimum 29-year sentence that was handed down today to David Boyd, who was convicted earlier this month of the murder of Nicky Allen back in 1992. It was an absolutely horrific murder. He lured the schoolgirl to a derelict warehouse where he proceeded to beat her. By the way, I should again just reiterate that the details of this are, of course, very, very distressing for people of a sensitive disposition, or indeed anyone, really. He beat her with a brick and stabbed her in the chest 37 times and then discarded her body very unceremoniously. It was an incredibly controversial case, not least because it's taken so long for Mr. Boyd to be brought to justice, but also because initially another individual, Mr. Heron, was wrongly convicted of the murder, and that has led, of course, to massive criticisms of the police force. And Nicky's mother there was talking, saying that she would only have been satisfied with a full life tariff. And I think that's a view that many people can sympathise with. So that is the very latest. Look, we'll be keeping you up to date from any more developments from Newcastle Crown Court and Nicky Allen's family as well. Just to reiterate, David Boyd has now been jailed for a minimum of 29 years for her murder. Right, look, I've got loads more coming your way, ladies and gentlemen. Very, very shortly, I will be taking you live to the Algarve. It's a reservoir near the Praia de Luge area where Madeleine McCann went missing. Search teams are currently having a look at an area around that reservoir in some woodland. There was a boat that went across the reservoir earlier on. It's based on what the German police believe is new intelligence. Could this be the breakthrough that the world has been waiting for? Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, just before we go to the Algarve for the very latest on the police search in the Madeleine McCann case, just a quick point of clarification, if that's OK, from a previous segment there. I would just like to make it abundantly clear that George Heron was wrongly tried for the murder of Nikki Allen and, of course, was found not guilty. There we go. So I just want to make that very, very clear. Now, to the latest on the search for Madeleine McCann, and a major search is underway at the reservoir on the Algarve after police received a tip-off. Dozens of Portuguese police and other specialists are searching an area in the Arade Dam, 30 miles from the spot where Madeleine disappeared in 2007. I am joined now by GB News' Home and Security editor, Mark White, who is in the Algarve. Mark, what has been going on today? What are the latest developments?
Well, very significant search activity. Dozens of members of the police and specialist teams that have congregated on what is actually a very remote area of the Algarve, but an area that is connected to the prime suspect in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann a decade and a half or more ago, when she disappeared from the holiday resort in Praia de Luz, which is about 30 miles from this location. This is linked to Christian Bruckner, though, that prime suspect, because he lived in a commune for a while, only about 7 miles from here. He frequented this area, we're told, on a number of occasions. And the German police are now confirming that they have actually received specific intelligence that has instigated this particular operation, and it is concentrated on a relatively small area. I'm just going to pop out of the way, Patrick, to give Ben, our cameraman, an opportunity to zoom in for you there to this cluster of white forensic tents down. They're on a peninsula on the western edge of the Arid Reservoir, and these are facilitating that search operation. The police have been using ground-penetrating radar. They've been sticking long probes into the ground as well. There are dive support teams that are here. They haven't been in the water diving as yet. We're told, Patrick, that the bulk of the search operation will be on the land around this kind of wooded area and down towards the shoreline. They've been aided Patrick, by the fact that actually there's been little rain here for quite a while now, so the water levels off the reservoir are about 15 or 20 feet lower than they normally would be. You can see that from the actual edges of the reservoir itself, and that's allowing the searchers to kind of probe just that bit deeper into the shoreline than they would have been able to before. So let's see, Patrick, what that key information is. The German prosecutors have said previously that they have key evidence that's convinced them that Christian Bruckner not only abducted but murdered Madeleine McCann in May of 2007. They've never shared that evidence with us while the investigation is still active. And it's still very active. As I say, this is the first major search operation since one that was launched just about a decade ago at the instigation of the Metropolitan Police. That was around Praia de Luz and found nothing in the end. This one, well, we await to see. It's scheduled for a few days, but depending on what they find in this area behind me, it could be extended.
Mark, thank you very much. Mark White there, our Home and Security Editor, who is in the Algarve for us, and will be keeping you up to date as and when there are any developments in that search for Madeleine McCann. Mark mentioned there this chap called Christian Bruckner, who is the #1 suspect in the Madeleine McCann case. But what do we actually know about him? OK, so Bruckner was born in Germany in 1976. He's reported to have lived in Portugal between 1995 and 2007, the year that Madeleine disappeared. Bruckner is currently in prison in Germany for the rape of an American tourist in Praia de Luz 2 years before Madeleine went missing. He was identified as a suspect by Portuguese officials in June 2020, but he has always denied involvement in Madeleine's disappearance. And we, of course, await more confirmation and more information from the variety of different police forces, specifically, I think, the German police, who, it's important to note, are usually very cautious and very conservative in this. They are absolutely adamant about this, though, that the new developments and the new evidence and etc. that has led them to look in this specific area. So we will be on scene and bring you all the updates as and when we get any in the search for Madeleine McCann. It is, of course, probably the world's most mysterious, perhaps, child disappearance. And maybe, just now, maybe we might be able to get some answers. But loads more to come between now and 4 o'clock. Find out why Chancellor Jeremy Hunt is confident that the UK economy is en route to growth. Could this be a little whiff of economic good news? And I will get reaction to the violent scenes in Cardiff last night after 2 teenage boys sadly died in a fatal crash. I will, of course, also be informing you all about Prince Harry, because he has lost the idea now that our Met Police or any other police force in this country can be for hire. Well, that's out the window. You cannot buy our police force, apparently. But now it's your headlines with Tamsin.
Patrick, thank you. Here are the headlines at 3:32. A sex offender who murdered a 7-year-old girl in 1992 has been jailed for life with a minimum of 29 years in prison. 55-year-old David Boyd lured Nikki Allen to a derelict warehouse in Sunderland's East End before stabbing her in the chest. He remained at large for over 30 years until he was convicted of murder earlier this month. Northumbria Police first prosecuted the wrong man, George Heron, who was cleared after a trial in 1993. Nikki's mother, Sharon Henderson, has fought since then for justice for Nikki.
Satisfied, I would have been satisfied to a life. This is a 7-year-old man. When's anybody going to talk crimes like this serious?
You're still angry with the police, Sharon?
I am, definitely. They haven't done the jobs properly. And this is what's happening to families like me over and over again. And it's injustice.
A former Met Police officer accused of failing to properly investigate Wayne Couzens over flashing incidents has been found guilty of gross misconduct. Samantha Lee was tasked to conduct an inquiry into the incidents in 2021. Couzens exposed himself to female members of staff at a restaurant in Kent weeks before he killed Sarah Everard. Samantha Lee was found to be dishonest, claiming the CCTV at the restaurant was deleted automatically. The German authorities leading the Madeleine McCann investigation say a major search is underway at a reservoir in Portugal after a tip-off was received. Dozens of Portuguese police and other specialists are searching an area 30 miles from where the 3-year-old went missing. The main suspect, Christian Bruckner, is facing sex offence charges in Germany and was in Portugal around the time Madeleine disappeared in 2007. Well, you can get more on all these stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2427 and 1.1521 euros. The price of gold is £1,586.60 per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,768 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Yeah, loads more to come on this show. Of course, I will be talking about the news that Rolf Harris has died and indeed the latest Prince Harry developments. But before all of that, government borrowing grew to £25.6 billion last month, according to the latest official figures. The second highest April borrowing figure on record. But when addressing the International Monetary Fund earlier on, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt remains confident that the UK economy is en route to growth.
Today, the IMF's assessment shows that we are on the right track. Their report forecasts growth of 0.4% in 2023, a 0.7 percentage point upgrade versus the April forecast. That's even higher than the Bank of England's forecast published last week for 0.25% growth in 23. The IMF also say we've acted decisively to fight inflation, which will substantially reduce to around 5% by the end of the year.
OK, so that's Jeremy Hunt there, the Chancellor. Now, here to break all this data down is our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money. OK, Liam, this sounds pretty heavy-duty stuff, is it?
Yeah, lots of numbers floating around, Patrick. This morning, the ONS released data that showed that the British government, in the month of April alone, borrowed £25.6 billion, a huge amount of money. And that's almost double what they borrowed in April 2022. That's in a single month. When you think the education budget is about 100 billion, right? It's an awful lot of money. And think of the interest that the government is now paying on our national debt. Our national debt's about £2.5 trillion. We're paying each month on interest. Certainly in April 2023, we paid, if we can change the graphic there, £9.8 billion interest. How much is £9.8 billion, Patrick? The interest we pay on a single month on our national debt. You could build 20 hospitals for £9.8 billion.
Right, just drill down on that. So, because I thought I heard you say that we spend the equivalent of building 20 new hospitals every month on the interest for our debt.
I did say that.
Grief.
Because that's correct. Certainly that's what we paid in April. Now,
wow.
So when you have the political and media class saying, oh, why can't we just borrow and spend more money?
Yeah.
You're nasty government ministers because you don't want to borrow and spend more money. That is why. Because at the moment, we're paying 10 billion quid a month on interest on our debt. Let me repeat that, Patrick. Yeah. £10 billion, you could lock 2p off the basic rate of income tax for the whole year. That's £10 billion. £10 billion is 20 new hospitals.
It's just remarkable.
Astonishing amount of money.
It's absolutely staggering. And so, yeah, absolutely. But Jeremy Hunt, I mean, putting a bit of a brave face on by the looks of it.
He didn't want to mention the government borrowing because the IMF's just given him a good story. And the IMF's given him a good story. They come to London and, you know, tell the rest of the world what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing. And the IMF, of course, until recently was forecasting that the British economy was going to contract this year. Well, they've slightly changed their tune. Again, I've got that in the graphic. So the IMF say that the US economy in this year, 2023, will grow by 1.6%. France will grow by 0.7%. The UK, this is the new number, will grow by 0.4%, and Germany will contract by 0.1%. This is the size of the economy in 2023. So the UK is no longer the slowest growing economy this year, according to IMF forecasts, in what we call the G7, the sort of advanced industrialised countries, because clearly there it's likely to outgrow Germany. But the mind boggles, Patrick, because just a month ago, the IMF was saying that the UK economy would contract by 0.3%, as eagle-eared, if you could be eagle-eared, sharp-eared listeners and viewers will have heard the Chancellor say in that clip. And now they're saying that the UK economy will grow by 0.4%. I mean, these people just...
Yeah. Well, it does appear that way, doesn't it, really?
And yet the press, a lot of the mainstream broadcasters, if you will, when the IMF came up with that forecast that we were the slowest in the G7, it was like everywhere, on a loop, 24/7.
Yeah.
And yet there seems to be a lot less reporting of the fact that the IMF has now completely changed its tune, turned the telescope round, and Britain, as I just showed, is now in the middle of the pack when it comes to the G7 economies. But there is, this isn't all doom and gloom. There is some pretty good economic news now coming through. We've got the inflation number out tomorrow for April. It's probably going to start with an 8, which isn't too bad. It's still really high, but given that the inflation rate in March started with a 10, it was 10.1. We've just had what we call the PMI numbers. That's like a survey, a sort of preliminary form of unofficial GDP numbers. That's showing that the economy is still growing pretty well. And you get a sense that entrepreneurs, business leaders are starting to feel that we're turning the corner, finally shaking off the implications of lockdown and the war in Ukraine, at least for now. And soon, I think, energy bills will start coming down for households too. The number I'm going to be looking at for tomorrow, Patrick, and I'm no doubt we'll be sitting here talking about it, isn't just the headline inflation number, it's the food inflation number. If that's still sky high, up in the high teens, as it was last month, then I'm sure it's going to attract an awful lot of comment, because wholesale food prices around the world have been coming down, yet as GB News viewers and listeners know, when you go to the supermarket, some of the prices are still eye-watering.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that is actually something that's worth a quick mention now, I think, Liam, which is in anticipation of what could happen tomorrow. Would that be the point that you think where public opinion, and indeed our politicians, frankly, should maybe even doing something I think you mentioned as the walk of shame from...
Well, it's kind of happened today. I mean, you and I discussed this a couple of months ago when food price inflation kept being really high. I said to you, look, he should get the Prime Minister, the Chancellor, they should get the bosses of the food retailers in, make them walk up Downing Street and actually say to them, folks, why is food prices inflation so high? Why are food prices going up by 15 or 20% year on year when wholesale food prices around the world are coming down? Well, last week, the Prime Minister had this kind of farm to fork summit where some of the food retailers came in. But today, Jeremy Hunt has been talking to food retailers at the Treasury. There hasn't really been a statement about it, but maybe that's a little bit of sort of preemptive spin, because they sense the food inflation number tomorrow is still going to be eye-wateringly high. So they want to be able to say, well, look, we're in consultation with the industry. We got this in hand, old boy. Don't worry about it.
Absolutely, Liam, thank you very much. As ever, Liam Halligan there, our economics and business editor. And look, can I just return, crowbarring this in, but I'm not going to let this go, because we're going to be talking about this a lot on the show today. A throw ahead to what I've got about 5:30. I'll be talking to a representative from Just Stop Oil. Why? Because an ordinary workman snapped on the streets today, and I'm amazed this hasn't happened more before. I've got a horrible feeling in my stomach that we're going to see something very serious happen soon, where somebody who is, in light of these kind of economic numbers that Liam has given us there, the price of food, the price of absolutely everything going up, people now more desperate than ever in their lifetimes, quite possibly, to go out and earn a crust that day, getting blocked off by the Just Stop Oil mob, and someone decided to get out of a van and give one of them a shove, and the police, instead of escorting them on a slow walk through the streets of our capital, decided that it was best to lift him instead. I'm going to be talking to someone from Just Stop Oil. That's going to be in the 5 o'clock hour. But look, I can see something absolutely terrible happening. People are feeling squeezed left, right and centre at the moment economically, and anyone who gets in the way of them and a pound note, I think, is copping it. But moving on. Police officers were injured in a riot in Cardiff last night following a fatal car crash. If you've not seen it already, stay tuned, because the footage from this is absolutely terrifying. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Welcome back. Now, in the last hour, the murderer of 7-year-old Nikki Allen has been sentenced to a minimum of 29 years in prison. David Boyd killed Nikki in 1992 by beating with a brick. I'm just going to warn you again, if it wasn't obvious that the details of this are absolutely harrowing. Beating her with a brick and repeatedly stabbing her before dumping her body in the Old Exchange building in Sunderland. Her mother broke down in tears as she spoke to the media outside court earlier on. Our national reporter Paul Hawkins joins us live from Newcastle Crown Court. Paul, what is the very latest on this absolutely horrendous case that, of course, took so long to actually come to fruition and result in a sentencing?
Yeah, well, in the last few minutes, Sharon Henderson, Nikki's mother, has been speaking just here outside the steps of the court. She's described the sentence as a disgrace and has effectively said that the search for justice goes on. She was demanding a whole life order from the judge. These are handed down in exceptionally rare cases. There are no more than 60 people in the UK currently serving a whole life order, and that was what she was calling for. The judge had to take into account how she would have passed the sentence before 2002 when that power was given to judges, and it wasn't just the Home Secretary that could impose a whole life order compared to the sentencing guidelines now. So there was never any question whether David Boyd would be given a life sentence. The question was, would it come with a minimum term? How long would that minimum term be? Or would he be given a whole life order, in which case there would never be any chance that he would be eligible for parole? Now, in the end, as you say, Patrick, the judge handed down a life sentence with a minimum order of 29 years, something that Nikki's mum has called a disgrace. Her solicitor, standing here next to her, representing her, read out a statement as well. They are going to file a complaint complaint with the IOPC, the Independent Office for Police Complaints, over the way Northumbria Police handled the investigation, which initially focused, and to use the words of Sharon Henderson's team, they used tunnel vision to focus in on a man called George Heron. He was tried in 1993 for the crime and then acquitted, cleared by a judge who deemed Northumbria Police's questioning of him to be too aggressive. Effectively, even though he had denied committing the crime 120 times, the judge was effectively saying that they'd forced a confession out of him, and so he was cleared at that trial, and that is why they are bringing Nicky's mum is bringing a complaint against the IOPC and also bringing a civil damages claim against Northumbria Police as well, who have apologised and admitted mistakes were made in the initial investigation, an apology which Nicky's mum has called hollow. We haven't heard from Northumbria Police today. So far, nothing from them. So maybe we'll hear from them throughout the course of the day. But as I say, David Boyd sentenced to a life term in jail. He's 55 years old now, so he'll be just shy of 85 before he's even eligible for release. But certainly the search for justice from Nicky's mum, Sharon, carries on.
Absolutely, Paul. Thank you very, very much. Paul Hawkins, our national reporter, live from outside Newcastle Crown Court, where, indeed, that sentencing has just taken place. Lots of strong views in the inbox about this sentencing. A minimum of 29 years, of course, for a crime that was initially committed in 1992. Lots of people getting in touch saying that it should have been a full life tariff as an absolute minimum. Of course, when cases like this arise, there are always ongoing calls, aren't there, especially when the victim is a young child, for a debate and a national discussion on things like capital punishment to be had. I'll go to that inbox very, very shortly. But another big story that dropped just before I came on air, actually, it was announced earlier today that the disgraced entertainer and convicted paedophile Rolf Harris has died at the age of 93. The Australian-born entertainer was jailed for 5 years and 9 months back in 2014 after being convicted of 12 indecent assaults against young girls between 1968 and 1986. He reportedly died of neck cancer and frailty of old age on May the 10th. That is according to a death certificate. Here to tell us more is GB News' national reporter Ellie Costello. Ellie.
Hi, Patrick. Yes, so Rolf Harris, the disgraced entertainer, the convicted paedophile, he actually died 2 weeks ago, according to this death certificate. It's been filed today at Maidenhead Town Hall. That's why we know about it today. But he did die on May the 10th of neck cancer and frailty of old age. That's just been confirmed from a registrar in Maidenhead. It was then very closely followed by a statement from the Harris family, who simply just said that they confirmed that Rolf Harris had died peacefully, surrounded by family and friends, and that he had been laid to rest. So that's quite interesting. It suggests that there has already been some sort of funeral, that the family have said goodbye, and it does suggest that they have wanted this to be quiet. They've wanted this to be private. They haven't said anything more than just confirming that he has died. He's lived pretty much as a recluse for the last 5-6 years at his home in Bray. There were photographs of a private ambulance outside that house in Berkshire a couple of weeks ago, which ties in with that date of May the 10th, when we now know that he died. So there were whispers, there were reports that he was in very ill health with neck cancer, but we now have it confirmed that he has died, aged 93, of neck cancer and old age.
And just to clarify again, the reason why we are just finding out about this now and the confirmation has just dropped, because the death has now been officially registered, is that right?
Yes. The death certificate has just been filed at Maidenhead Town Hall, so it was actually only registered today. That's the only reason why we have that official confirmation, and the family have obviously decided off the back of that that they will release that statement. We know that his wife is still alive. She's 91 years old. She's also living in that house in Bray. She has Alzheimer's. She remarkably stood by him throughout the disgrace, throughout the horrific crimes that he perpetrated against children. But important to note that there's been nothing from his wife or his daughter who he leaves behind.
Absolutely, Ellie. Thank you very, very much. Ellie Costello, our national reporter, bringing you the very latest on Rolf Harris's death. I'm just going to delve into the inbox now, because it's been an action-packed show so far, hasn't it? And there's loads more coming. I did go in at the top there with this ordinary workman, this normal guy, a van man, if you want to call him that, who snapped finally at Just Stop Oil and decided that he'd had enough and wanted to push them out of the way. I'm going to be talking to Charlie Mullins very shortly, who, of course, used to own Pimlico Plumbers, a fleet there of workmen who no doubt will have some very, very choice words for Just Stop Oil. But what I think is fascinating, and it's grinding a lot of your gears, actually, like Karen, who's been on in the inbox, actually, which is that the police appeared to be escorting Just Stop Oil through the streets, giving them some kind of police protection. This guy gets out, snaps, shoves one of them to the ground. He's then lifted by the cops. And it does make me wonder what the priorities are. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think, unfortunately, and this would, of course, be wrong, but I just think it's an inevitability that unless someone stops Just Stop Oil walking through the streets, it only takes a second for someone who's having a bad day, who's got a sick relative in the car with them, or someone who's right on the brink of financial ruin who needs to get to work to do something they later go on and regret, and someone from Just Stop Oil gets seriously hurt. Karen says, Patrick, I cannot believe that the police have decided to detain this man. It should be Just Stop Oil who should be the criminals. I will be putting all of these comments to a representative from Just Stop Oil in the last hour of this show, so make sure that you stay tuned for that. But I just also want to mention this, which is, and there's a lot of this coming in now, about, of course, this terrible, terrible case that we've just heard there from Newcastle Crown Court. David Boyd sentenced to a minimum of 29 years after the absolutely brutal and horrific murder of Nikki Allen back in 1992. Bruce has been on. I have just listened to the details of this horrific murder of Nikki Allen, and his sentence is 29 years. He thinks that the only best thing, and I'm paraphrasing here, I think for the sake of all of our listeners, Bruce, to be fair, and our viewers, but he thinks that capital punishment is the only answer and the only solution for child killers. And whenever a case happens like this, even though this is quite historic, only being brought to justice now, it always opens that window about whether or not people think that we should reintroduce the death penalty, capital punishment for people responsible for a particular type of crime. So get your views coming in on that. GBviews at gbnews.com. And remember, it is indeed .com now, not .co.uk. But yes, like I said, it is an action-packed show. I'm going to be returning to this Just Stop Oil story because activists are protesting again today, but it was this motorist who was detained by police. Whose side are the police really on here, OK? You've got people staring down the barrel of economic ruin who say, look, enough is enough. I think it is about time the police started standing up for those people and not these Just Stop Oil numpties. They're not on the side of the working class, are they? None of them were at work today. What on earth were they doing? They're causing economic ruin to people, and they're the ones who get a police escort. There's something very skewed there. I'm also, of course, going to be talking about Prince Harry because he has lost his battle to try to be able to essentially buy the Met Police in order to have his own protection. I'll be getting stuck right into that. And are we on the brink? Are we on the brink of a net migration lie being exposed? OK. As well, I will be going live to the Algarve, where Mark White, our Home and Security Editor, is based, as the hunt for Madeleine McCann continues. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, everybody. Patrick Christys here. It's just gone 4 p.m. Absolutely loads on the agenda today. Here's what I'm going in with. Whose side are you on, OK? Because the police decided to lift a bloke, an ordinary workman, a white van man who got out of his car and did what a lot of people want to do, which is shove Just Stop Oil out of the way. The police are giving them an escort through the streets of London, blocking people getting to work, and they go after this guy. Shouldn't it be the other way around? Whose side are you on? In other news, we will, of course, be bringing you all of the very latest in the Madeleine McCann search. Mark White is on the scene where this search is taking place. The police are saying that they've had specific new evidence, which is why they're searching this place. Could we finally get answers to one of the world's greatest missing person mysteries? Finally, as well, on this particular one as well, Rolf Harris has died. We'll be having a look at what we know anyway of the disgraced former star and convicted paedophile as well, after he's passed away. Now, this one piqued my interest today after Dominic Raab announced that he's going to resign as an MP, and he's not the only one, is he? Let's be honest. I was wondering whether or not Suella Braverman might be next, not because I want it, but just because I wonder whether or not it's becoming such an unappealing time to be an MP at the moment. It must feel as though absolutely everybody is working against you. Who on earth would want to be an MP in this current climate? And finally, as well, we're going to be talking about this. Prince Harry is officially a loser. That's right, he has lost his trial anyway when it comes to trying to get police for hire in order to preserve his own security. We'll be talking rather a lot about that. Patrick Christys on GB News. Get your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.com. Remember that new email address. Absolutely loads to go out today. Whose side are you on? Are you on the side of the white van man, or are you on the side of Just Stop Oil? We'll be talking about all of that. Now, though, it's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. The top story on GB News today, a sex offender who murdered a 7-year-old girl in 1992 has today been jailed for life with a minimum term to serve of 29 years in prison. 55-year-old David Boyd lured Nikki Allen to a derelict warehouse in Sunderland's East End before stabbing her. He remained at large for over 30 years until he was convicted of murder earlier this month. Northumbria police first prosecuted the wrong man, George Heron, who was cleared after a trial in 1993. Nikki's mother, Sharon Henderson, has fought since then to get justice for her daughter.
Satisfied, I would have been satisfied with life. This is a 7-year-old man. When's anybody going to talk crimes like this serious?
You're still angry with the police, Sharon?
I am, definitely. They haven't done the jobs properly. And this is what's happening to families like me over and over again. And it's injustice.
Now, a former Met Police officer accused of failing to properly investigate Wayne Couzens over incidents of indecent exposure has been found guilty of gross misconduct. Samantha Lee was tasked with conducting an inquiry into the incidents in 2021. Couzens exposed himself to female members of staff at a restaurant in Kent just weeks before he killed Sarah Everard. Samantha Lee was found to be dishonest, claiming the CCTV at the restaurant had been deleted automatically. The German authorities leading the Madeleine McCann investigation say a major search is underway at a reservoir in Portugal after a tip-off was received. Dozens of Portuguese police and other specialists are searching an area 30 miles from where the 3-year-old went missing 16 years ago. The main suspect, Christian Bruckner, is facing sex offence charges in Germany and was in Portugal around the time Madeleine disappeared in 2007. Here, 2 teenagers who died in a crash in Cardiff have been named locally as Kyrese Sullivan, who was 16, and 15-year-old Harvey Evans. A clean-up operation is still underway and South Wales police are continuing their investigation into the crash. There was violent unrest in the wake of the fatal incident in which police were pelted with missiles, including fireworks, and 2 cars were set on fire. Friends of the boys say they were riding an e-scooter without helmets when they died. Some residents had claimed they were being chased by officers, but that has been denied by South Wales Police. The convicted paedophile Rolf Harris has died at the age of 93. The announcement was made this afternoon, but his death certificate says he died on the 10th of May of neck cancer and old age. The Australian-born artist and former children's television presenter was a family favourite for decades before he was convicted of 12 indecent assaults in 2014. Labour has accused the Prime Minister of dither and delay as he continues to consider whether to order an investigation into the Home Secretary's conduct. Suella Braverman is accused of breaching the ministerial code by asking civil servants to organise a private speed awareness course for her. She maintains nothing untoward took place, but the Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner says there are serious questions to be answered.
As Ministers knows, the Home Secretary has already admitted to breaching the ministerial code by using personal emails to share sensitive government information. So I ask the Minister today, how many strikes before she's out?
Well, the Paymaster General Jeremy Quinn says the Prime Minister's taking time to gather the facts.
The Prime Minister has met both the independent adviser and the Home Secretary and asked for further information. It is right that the Prime Minister, as the head of the Executive and the arbiter of the Ministerial Code, be allowed time to receive relevant information on this matter.
Overseas students will be banned from bringing dependents to the UK from next January. The ban, which attempts to bring down migration levels, won't include the students in postgraduate research. International students also won't be able to switch out of the student route to work before completing their studies. The Prime Minister says the new policy would make a significant difference to net migration numbers. And as you've been hearing, the Duke of Sussex has lost his bid to legally challenge the Home Office's decision to block him from paying for police protection while he's in the UK. Prince Harry had wanted to foot the bill himself after being told he would no longer receive the same degree of protection as a working royal when visiting the country. The decision comes a week after Harry and Meghan say they were chased through New York at high speed by paparazzi photographers. The Home Office says it welcomes the judgment, which upholds the integrity of the protective security system. This is GB News. More news as it happens. Now back to Patrick.
Well, it's finally happening. People have had it up to here with Just Stop Oil, and they are kicking right off. Your ordinary working men and women are saying, no, enough is enough, get to work yourselves or get out of my way. The motorist was detained by police after he challenged Just Stop Oil protesters in central London. So footage filmed by Just Stop Oil shows a workman got out of his van, pushing one of the protesters off the road on Blackfriars Bridge. For people not familiar with it, it's an arterial route around London, of course. Interesting, isn't it, this lot? They only do things around London, don't they, really? Anyway, when he tried to do the same to a second activist, there's the police. 2 police officers shove him, by the way, into oncoming traffic. It's not going to notice that. Pin him against the van, and they're leaving the protesters completely alone. Police later said that he was detained for common assault, but he was not arrested. Police are investigating the incident. To be honest with you, I find it absolutely staggering that if you decide to not have a job and hold a banner up and put a high-vis jacket on and walk through the streets of anywhere, frankly, blocking ordinary people, getting to work or getting to hospital appointments or whatever you're doing, that you get a police escort for that. But if you decide that you need some money in your back pocket because we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis and you don't want those numpties in your way and you give one of them a shove, you potentially get nicked. What kind of world are we living in? I'm joined now by Charlie Mullins, who's the founder of Pimlico Plumbers, a man who knows a thing or two about hard work and getting people to work hard as well. Charlie, what's your take on what we've just seen there? That guy getting short shrift from the police for shoving just up all out.
I mean, it's disgraceful. I mean, he's not actually breaking the law. He's actually moving them out of the way. It's the protesters that are breaking the law. And yet the police seem to be on the opposite side. You know, they're sort of getting onto people that are trying to go to what, as you say, proper working class fella. Everybody's had enough of it. Everybody's getting off with it now. Yeah. And something needs to be done about it. And how much longer can it go on before someone's really going to get hurt in this?
This is exactly my view, mate, because I would hate to see it, and it is absolutely not correct and it's not right. But I'm telling you, it's a matter of time before someone runs over someone from Just Stop Oil or batters them or something like that. You can see it coming a mile
Well,
off.
of course it is. I mean, look at some of the people that are going, as you said, going to doctor's appointments or hospital or emergencies, and they're starting dictating who they're going to let through. I mean, what right have they to start taking the law under their own hands? They need to do something with it, and it's a simple solution. At the moment, they're arresting them, letting them out the same day, next day, so they carry on protesting. They need to sort of detain them for at least a month, and we know the prisons are full, etc., etc. But I'll come up with an idea that a lot of the Just Oil pests don't like, but I think they should be put in a disused military base, let the army look after them for a month, and just don't let them out for a month and learn them a lesson. And obviously they get a washing all while they're in there, or shower.
Well, we've got disused military bases, actually, that we can do it for people who've just arrived across the channel, so maybe we could do them for people who are blocking our motorways and gluing themselves to things. But when you were in your absolute heyday at Pimlico Plumbers, you must have had a huge fleet of people going out pretty much 24/7, I imagine.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Around London. I mean, how damaging could it have been, do you think, to your business if they'd have been getting in the way then? And also, as well, what would you have done if that video that we've just seen of that chap who's pushing them out of the way there, you know, it had been a Pimlico Plumbers van or something, and he gets in hot water with the law? How would you have responded to that?
What, if he worked for me, the guy? Well, I'd give him a pay rise, if I'm being honest, because, you know, he's getting things moving. He's standing up. Like, we just need to be standing up, and maybe the police have got to not be so woke about it and do something about it. I mean, there's loads of things they can do. They can put a tag on them, put them in a curfew so they're not allowed out for a month. Then there's no more cost to us. I mean, spray their faces orange with dye. And again, not allowed out on the streets. I mean, you're laughing, but it's a fact. I mean, they won't wash it off, will they? I mean, why is it they all look like they're like soap dodgers, don't they? They all look like Gormleys, and none of them are at work. So who is paying for all this? You know, who's paying for it? The policing that is costing to actually, you know, just to try and move them along, kind of thing. And then you've got all the businesses and the work people that can't go to work. It's so wrong, and I mean, this guy, honestly, he needs a pay rise.
Yeah, one thing that I really... By the way, actually, before we move on to this, can I just say, if anyone knows who this guy is, OK, can you let us know? gbviews@gbnews.com. I would personally like to buy this guy a pint, and I'm sure there's quite a few people who would as well. I know that we've blurred his face, though. Obviously, people can go on social media and see this viral video that's doing the rounds. If anyone knows who this guy is, all right, please can you let us know? Because I think he's trying to do everyone a favour here. He's trying to clear the route. There might be someone, for all we know, 2 cars behind, who's got the wife next to him in the passenger seat, having a stroke or in labour or whatever. But this, to me, Charlie, just seems to be like a shameless war on the working class, and our police force is aiding and abetting this, because you've got ordinary people in the middle of a cost of living crisis who he might be 100 quid away from not being able to pay his rent this month, and he's absolutely clinging on. That lot of, you know, middle-aged what's-its who are wandering the streets. It doesn't look like they're short of a bob or two, does it? Or they just don't care about the working class. It's a war on the working class.
Yeah, well, obviously they've either got rich parents or they're on benefits or something, because obviously he's clearly a working guy trying to get to work, and I think loads of us would like to do what he done, and as I say, I think we've got to do it more. I just think all of us need to just shove them out of the way, and hopefully the police understand that it's them they should be arrested and detain them. Don't keep letting them out. I mean, they're just laughing at the police. They're laughing at the working class people, and it needs to stop, rightly as you said earlier, before someone seriously gets hurt here. You know, I had a friend, James Weld, a TV guy, and he was on his way to hospital for treatment, and he got held up. I mean, someone's going to die over this.
But if you or I did pretty much anything, I mean, I would imagine if you and I hatched a plot now where the end result of that plot was to either criminally damage something, which does sometimes happen when they, lob a load of paint over a snooker table or some artwork or something, or to cost the economy millions of pounds, as happens with hold-ups and slow-ups, or to stop someone getting health care, I would expect that we'd get nicked for that.
Oh, undoubtedly.
But if we put an orange vest on with Just Stop Oil on the back of it, and we went outside this office now and did exactly the same thing, Charlie, apparently we get a police escort.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I mean, and you've got to look gormless and all, and then you get away with it. No, we have to be serious.
It's easier for me than it is for some.
Something just needs to be done about it, and I think what this guy's done today... And this is not the first case. There's been a few other people that have stood up and said to these people, it needs to stop and it needs to end. I mean, it's just crazy. Why do we need to fight? Why does the government sort of not do something about it? Why don't they give the police the powers to arrest them, hold them for a month, detain them for a month, and, as I say, put them in the military camps?
Now, about 5:30, so in just over an hour's time, I'm going to have Just Stop Oil on the show. And Shirley, I'm putting you on the spot a bit here, but I want to give you the chance to talk directly to them. What would you have to say to Just Stop Oil? Because they will be here on this show in just about an hour's time.
I'll tell them the same. I think they're pests. They're very disruptive, costing us a fortune. They need to behave themselves, protest in a proper manner, and stop being nuisances. Do
you have any sympathy for their cause? Do you have any sympathy for their cause at all? What if they come on and say, look, this is a small price, but we're very sorry that people are having to be held up at work. We're very sorry that people are having to get so angry about this. But do they not understand that the world is going to burn if we don't do something about it? That's what they'll say.
Load of rubbish. It's going to make no difference whether we stop the cut back on the oil. There's too much money involved in the oil for these people to stop anything. So they need to just protest in the right way. And if anything, they're actually endangering it more because of all the emission charges and all the shit they put out.
OK, that's all right, don't worry. I'll just make a very quick apology for the language that you had there.
But you know what I'm saying? All the rubbish...
It's easily done. Just to reiterate, very sorry for the language. All right.
They're just a pest to society, and they're costing us lots of money. I mean, let's find out the ones that work and don't. They can't work, because if I had somebody working for me and they said, I'm taking a day off to protest, then I'd get rid of them anyhow.
Yeah, Charlie, look, thank you very much. Always a pleasure to have you on. Always a pleasure to have you in the studio. I really appreciate your time and everything that you do. Cheers. It's Charlie Mullins there. OBE, no less, as well. I always demote you every time you come on here. OBE, there we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, very much a gear shift now, OK? Very much a shift in tone, because we're going to get the very latest on the Madeleine McCann search. The major search is underway at a reservoir on the Algarve after police received, quotes, a tip-off. So dozens of Portuguese police and other specialists are searching an area of the Arad Dam, 30 miles from the spot where Madeleine disappeared in 2007 in Praia de Luz. Our GB News Home and Security editor, Mark White, is in Portugal and has sent back this report.
At the edge of the Arad Reservoir, a fire and rescue service rigid inflatable was visible at first light, testing the waters for the dive teams who'll spend the next few days in a targeted search of this area. Throughout the morning, dozens of police and other officials arrived at this makeshift staging area for briefings inside these blue tents before being deployed to their search grids. 16 years on from the disappearance of Madeleine McCann in the resort of Praia de Luz, there is still no concrete evidence of what happened to the 3-year-old. But both Portuguese and German police are convinced convicted sex offender Christian Bruckner is the man responsible for her abduction. He's currently serving 7 years in a German prison for the rape of an American tourist in Praia da Luz 2 years before Madeleine's disappearance. About half a mile from the staging area, another group of tents are visible in woodland just back from the shoreline. It was the German authorities who requested this latest search. It's reported that Christian Bruckner used to visit this area around the dam on a regular basis. It's a spot that he was apparently particularly fond of. In fact, he lived just about 7 miles from here for a while in a commune, and Praia da Luz itself is only some 20 miles further down the road. The German authorities have not yet said what's brought them to this area, miles from anywhere. But it is the first major search operation in the Algarve for almost a decade, since the Metropolitan Police asked for a series of digs around the Praia da Luz area in 2014. A small group of Scotland Yard detectives are out here this week as official observers. Of course, there is always intense public interest anytime there are developments in this more than a decade and a half long mystery. Madeleine McCann's parents, who've seen many false dawns in this protracted investigation, are being kept informed about the progress of this latest search. Mark White, GB News, at the Arad Dam on the Algarve.
OK, so Mark White is indeed on the Algarve. We'll be going to him a little bit later on in the show, as and when there are any developments. But he mentioned there a chap called Christian Bruckner, who is the #1 suspect in the Madeleine McCann case. But what do we know about him? Bruckner was born in Germany in 1976. He's reported to have lived in Portugal between 1995 and 2007, the year that Madeleine disappeared. Bruckner is currently in prison in Germany for the rape of an American tourist in Praia da Luz 2 years before Madeleine went missing. He was identified as a suspect by Portuguese officials in June 2020, but he's always denied involvement in Madeleine's appearance. And it is, of course, more than 16 years since Madeleine McCann disappeared, and no other case of a missing child, as far as I can really recall, has received quite as much coverage as this, or been of so much interest to the public. But why is that? And I'm joined now by broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. Lucy, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. This is something that has perplexed me for a long period of time. Why is it this specific Madeleine McCann case has got such massive global attention and been able to retain that attention for such a long period of time?
I think there are three main reasons. The first is that it is simply every single parent's worst nightmare, and therefore as a story, as a narrative, it's something that a large number of people globally could really relate to. The fear, the anguish, and perhaps also the idea that you don't ever want to lose hope. The second sense is because we've all been children. We have all been perhaps in a situation where we lost sight of mummy and daddy, we got lost, or maybe we were just waiting for them to collect us and we started to fantasize about what it would be like if mummy and daddy didn't come to collect us from school, from the ballet class, from the football lesson. But I think the third thing is that it is fundamentally a mystery. As you said in your report, it just simply hasn't been solved yet. And it's a story that over the years, people have talked to each other about, they've speculated what has happened, but we've had no closure. We've had absolutely no closure whatsoever. So that drift effect, that prolonging of the story that hasn't ended, has contributed to a really primitive story about loss, but also about hope, really never getting out of the public eye.
No, absolutely. And because there's been so much information, misinformation, false dawns, and like you just said there, mystery, and because it's been going on for such a long period of time and it had that massive initial burst of media, a massive initial burst of it, I think people feel as though that they have kind of lived this experience for a long period of time. Potentially now we're seeing the combination of that. We'll have to wait and see, of course. But maybe there's that as well. This has been something that has been in people's lives for such a long period of time, and they want those answers.
Yes, and I think we have to remember that the very time that it took place was actually a bank holiday. It was what one might call a slow news period, and therefore the story absolutely saturated the media at the time and became very quickly embedded in the national consciousness for sure, but maybe also internationally, because as I say, it's a story that so many people can relate to, a lost child. But there's a reason why in fiction terms, mystery stories, thrillers, detective novels outsell pretty much everything else apart from romance, because we all love a story that has a conclusive ending. And the problem with this, there are so many sadnesses around it, but in terms of narrative terms, it still exists because there hasn't been an ending. We don't know what that ending is. And in many cases, for some people and for the parents of Madeleine McCann, they have been hoping against hope for all this time. You would never as a parent want to relinquish that hope. But at the same time, you want to balance that out with the longing for certainty, the longing to put this story behind you and to get on with your lives. And again, that's something that we can all relate to, whether we've been through a trauma of this magnitude or not. We all want clarity. We all want closure.
Lucy, thank you very, very much for your insight on this. As Lucy Beresford there is a broadcaster and psychotherapist, and as the police force is a multinational police force, is scouring the forestry, the shrubbery, as it were, around a reservoir near where Madeleine McCann disappeared those 16 years ago. I thought it was just worthwhile casting our minds as to why this particular case has gripped the public attention for as long as it has. We will be going to the Algarve a little bit later on in this show to give you all of the very latest up-to-the-minute updates on this search for Madeleine McCann. And there's loads more on this story currently on our website. Simply head to GBNews.com, where you will find the best analysis of absolutely all of the news of the day, of course, including that story. But it's another day and another court case involving Prince Harry, and it's official. He's an absolutely massive loser. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Yes, welcome back. I just want to tease ahead to a couple of really big stories that I'm going to be covering in the next hour. Nigel Farage will join me live on this show to get that reaction from what a lot of people are calling on net migration lie. The net migration figures and illegal migration figures are set to drop on Thursday. Nigel's got strong views about it, as we all know, but it comes as the Home Office has vowed to stop students from bringing family to the UK in a bid to curb migration. So, an end to the dependence. For a long time, people think this has been a back door into Britain. You can pay your student fees and wallop, here you go. Here's a life in the UK. Nigel's got strong views, as I've said. I'm also going to be interviewing live a Just Stop Oil representative. It is after the white van man, and if anyone knows who he is, please get in touch because we would like to buy that man a pint. He decided to shove one of them out of the way early. He finally snapped, an ordinary working man who says enough is enough, and the police decided that he was the one that they should be taking action with and not, indeed, the Just Stop Oil protesters. So it's going to be a live Wire 5, but this story landed a bit earlier on, didn't it? And it involves Prince Harry, and I just thought I'd go on by saying this, really. Prince Harry is officially an absolutely massive loser. He's lost his High Court case to buy police protection. There are some things that money can't buy, Harry, like class, dignity, family, genuine popularity, a moral compass. And now he's found out that he can add the police to that list. A judge has now refused the artist formerly known as Prince Harry permission to bring a judicial review over the decision in what would have a second challenge relating to his security arrangements. Good, the self-entitled little weasel. He wants his cake and he wants to eat it as well, doesn't he? Well, what he should be doing is eating humble pie and begging his family and nation of birth for forgiveness. Harry literally had to manufacture some kind of high-speed chase in New York to bolster his claims that his life would be in danger without police protection. He's even incited radical Islamists with his comments about slotting 20 Taliban fighters, or however many it was. If he and his children need protection in the UK, in my view, it's his own fault. He wants to be an ordinary person, but he doesn't want to actually live like an ordinary person. And he was actually content for the real ordinary people like you and me to potentially have fewer police officers looking after them whilst he paid hundreds of thousands of pounds for his own protection. I think that makes him quite selfish, doesn't it? You know, the only protection I think Harry really needs is a strong prenuptial agreement and a world-class divorce lawyer. GB Views at gbnews.com. Get your views coming in thick and fast. I'm joined now by Charlie Raves, the former royal correspondent for The Sun. Charlie, how do you react to the news that our Met Police, even to Prince Harry, are not for hire?
It's a great victory for common sense, basically, Patrick. He was never going to win this case. This is the second judicial review that he has asked for, and this was on purely the fact he wanted to pay. Basically, he wanted to hire Metropolitan Police gun guards if he ever comes back to the UK. And we have to remember that if he does come back to the UK, as he did for the King's coronation, he was in fact protected, as all the people were protected. He didn't have a specific PPO, which is a personal protection officer, but he has got police protection when he comes back to the UK that he doesn't have to pay for. It's there. That's when he's staying within the royal confines, if you like. But we have to remember that the first judicial review, which is about the composition of RAVIC, which is the Royal and VIP Executive Committee. He wants to know how they are made up and how they make their decisions. And that's still got to go ahead. Well, unfortunately for Harry, the representatives on that committee include representatives of his brother and his father, as well as the Home Office and the police. So he's got no chance, really.
But why should the British taxpayer have had to suffer so that a bloke, and he is now just a bloke, OK, who's fallen out with his family, largely of his own making, wants to get protection because he has, in many ways, incited some of the potential violence or press attention against himself anyway? I mean, it just seems absolutely bonkers, but it is nice that he is now officially a loser.
It is nice that he is officially a loser, and he's got a lot more cases coming up against a variety of newspapers, including my own former newspaper, The Sun, and the Mail and the Mirror. And he's basically, as I've said to you before, he's got a season ticket for court cases, this guy. So he just continues to go ahead. But more importantly, this decision also means that you will not get sort of Z-list celebrities jumping on. If this had been granted, you would not get Z-list celebrities jumping on the bandwagon saying, "Oh, I need a gun cop because I'm going to open a supermarket down in Salisbury or whatever." I mean, it's ridiculous. So it's good day for justice, and a good day for Britain, and good day for the police.
Absolutely. Look, thank you very, very much. That's Charlie Ray there, who is, of course, the former royal correspondent for The Sun, imparting some wisdom. He did mention it's a good day for the police. Yeah, OK, in that case it is. But as you well know, one of our big stories today is the police's heavy-handed response to an ordinary working chap who got out of his van and barged Just Stop Oil out the way. I would happily rather give that guy a pint than see him nicked. If anyone knows who he is, get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.com, and certainly we would like to have a word with him here. We are going to be interviewing somebody from Just Stop Oil a bit later on in the show. And again, just want to make it very clear as well, we're going to be talking to Nigel Farage live here in the next hour, because the Home Office has vowed to stop students bringing dependents, their family, to the UK to curb migration. Nigel thinks we are part of a big net migration lie, a net migration con. There is news now of that government clampdown. We'll be talking about all of that with Nigel very, very shortly. And I will tell you why one of the world's most famous art galleries has gone woke. You will not get your heads around this. It's Polly now, though, with your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this hour. A sex offender who murdered a 7-year-old girl in 1992 has been jailed for life with a minimum term to serve of 29 years. 55-year-old David Boyd lured Nikki Allen to a derelict warehouse in Sunderland's East End before stabbing her. He remained at large for over 30 years until he was convicted of her murder early this month. Northumbria Police first prosecuted the wrong man, George Heron, who was cleared after a trial in 1993. Nikki's mother, Sharon Henderson, has fought since then for justice for her daughter.
Satisfied, I would have been satisfied with life. This is a 7-year-old man. When's anybody going to talk? Crimes like is serious.
You're still angry with the police, Sharon?
I am, definitely. They haven't done the jobs properly. And this is what's happening to families like me over and over again. And it's injustice.
Well, a former Met police officer accused of failing to properly investigate Wayne Couzens over flashing incidents has been found guilty of gross misconduct. Samantha Lee was tasked to conduct an inquiry into those incidents in 2021. Couzens exposing himself to female members of staff at a restaurant in Kent just weeks before he killed Sarah Everard. Well, Samantha Lee was found to be dishonest, claiming the CCTV at the restaurant had been automatically deleted. And as you've been hearing, the German authorities leading the Madeleine McCann investigation say a major search is underway at a reservoir in Portugal after a tip-off was received. Dozens of Portuguese police and other specialists are searching an area 30 miles from where the 3-year-old went missing in 2007. The main suspect, Christian Bucher, is facing sex offence charges in Germany and was in Portugal at around the time Madeleine first disappeared. You can get more on all these stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Last week, I brought you the news that the number of foreign students in the UK net had hit around 600 The Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, said that she was hugely proud of that in arguably one of the most tone-deaf announcements that I think I've ever heard. But now the government is targeting students as it bids to cut net migration. From next year, overseas students won't be allowed to bring family with them except under specific circumstances. And I'm very pleased now to be joined by Conservative MP for Morley and Outwood. It's Andrea Jenkins. Andrea, look, thank you very much. I do have to ask, OK, do you not think that Gillian Keegan really is in the wrong job if she's Education Secretary and she is saying that it's absolutely fantastic that we've managed to hit our record of this amount of students 8 years early or whatever it was? I mean, what was going on there?
Completely, and it's something like, what is it, 9 times higher than the figures of 2019. I mean, I was invited when the brief time I was the Skills Minister, HE Minister, to attend a meeting with the likes of Suella, but it then got cancelled and then it got rescheduled without my knowledge. And had I been at that meeting, Patrick, I would have fought as strong as Suella on this, because it's a knock-on effect, isn't it? You know, especially if they've been bringing their dependents and families over as well. The net migration figures, it's knock-on effects on not only our housing, our GP appointments, our dentists, our schools. And I want to see every department clamp down and get tougher on this.
Absolutely. And this idea that, oh, it's all right because they all go home afterwards is absolute rubbish. It's not. And the Migration Observatory has a reasonably good data as far as they're saying that around 85% of them go back. Well, are we factoring independence into that? 85%, by the way, of a huge number still leaves a lot of people here. Now, I've got to be honest with you, the idea that you're stopping students bringing family to the UK, given that we're about to see potentially eye-wateringly high net migration figures on Thursday, is this just rearranging the decking on the Titanic?
I mean, I'm just quite as frustrated as you, Patrick, to be honest, because I want to see every Secretary of State, you know, fight for this. Because let's not forget, every member of the Cabinet, including the Prime Minister himself, including every Conservative MP, we stood on a manifesto in 2019 for it to be 250,000 net migration. And this is far from that. So, you know, we've got to work our socks off to deliver, because when you're in government, it's about trusting the government to deliver, and you know, every one of us in the party should take this seriously and ensure we deliver on this.
What do you think more can be done? Because I think the public have lost faith, or I got a feeling that on Thursday any public sympathy that they had is going to break. And they look at what's going on with Suella Braverman now, which in my book is absolute nonsense. You've got a lady here who got a speeding ticket. I mean, the Archbishop of Canterbury was done for speeding, for goodness sake. It's easily done,
Exactly.
right? And then she asks a pretty straightforward question, which is, can I do it privately? The headlines are all, she tries to dodge points on a licence. That's the point of a speed awareness course. No, but that's the point of a speed awareness course. Anyone who wants to do a speed awareness course is trying to not get points on their licence. And then this narrative is rumbling on. It does appear like Suella Braverman is potentially being thrown under the bus a little bit here. Would you say that she is, do you think?
A million billion %, because I mean, let's look at the people who's been targeted over the years. I mean, Priti Patel, you know, the civil service tried to target her. And do you remember only a few years ago when she was Home Secretary about the leaked WhatsApp messages of the civil servants saying how abhorrent the Rwanda policy was, and that they, you know, they might need mental health support as civil servants. It's just bonkers. And then we saw a big thing with Boris. We saw Raab. We saw Jacob Rees-Mogg with the civil servants when he wanted him to not work from home, actually get in the office. It's all the centre-right of the Conservative Party. And do you know something? Who's going to be next? We've got to stand down with this.
Yeah, and that must be a massive concern for people such as yourself, who are, frankly, brave enough to come on and speak your mind in situations exactly like this. Well, is it going to be you next? There does appear to be a very thin layer of people who are trying to do what the public elected them to do in government now, and then a very fat layer of people who don't want them to do that, who are supposed to be working for and with people like yourself. And I find that very difficult for me to get my head around. I'm just going to return, if it's OK, to this issue specifically of the students, right? So the Home Office is now going to stop the students from bringing their families to the UK, a bid to curb this migration. You know, net migration migration of students, etc., is expected to be around 600,000. It's very tricky to know how many of them go back. Can I just reiterate, when Gillian Keegan was saying that this was a huge, she's the Education Secretary, that this is a great thing that we've got this amount of people, it would appear that she is therefore at odds with manifesto promises, large swathes of public opinion, and arguably what is best for this country. I mean, should she go, do you think, if she thinks this is a great thing?
I mean, look, to me, she's at odds with the sex education as well, what's been taught in schools. And, we've got this review going on. So I just think, we need to actually have conservative policies again, and we need to be strong on the likes of immigration, strong on policing, protect freedom of speech. I mean, the stuff that also was going on earlier with the policing, with the Just Stop Oil, arresting, just normal citizens, it's just got bonkers, Patrick. And we need some common sense back in the government. And 100%. I would like to see more of the centre-right, actually, Brexiteers taking positions. I'm not bothered about one myself. I don't particularly care. It's great being an outspoken backbencher again. Time's ticking. And I think the next election, people need to know there's a clear difference between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party.
Yeah, and it's difficult because you could fit a Rizzler paper between the two at the moment in a lot of senses. You mentioned there about sex education in schools. It's not the only thing I know you're passionate about, although this kind of ties into it. There's a story that I'm very grateful to have you on for, because you speak very passionately about this. A teacher has been sacked for refusing to use a young child's preferred pronouns. And, I mean, take it away. This is bonkers, isn't it?
Completely bonkers, and I mean, look at what we saw in my neighbouring seat of Batley. That teacher going into hiding, and he's still in hiding. And I understand he's changed his name, had to move away, got police protection. This is just crazy. I mean, he praised a group of young girls, saying, "Well done, girls." Now I understand he's got different views than myself on same-sex marriage. I mean, I don't care who somebody marries. I think marriage is a great thing. But we are meant to be a country where, we protect freedom of religious expression, etc. And I don't know in what guise it was, whether he got asked it as his personal view, but we shouldn't be sacking teachers for expressing their views. Like we saw also with university lecturers being hounded when they dare to say what a woman is. It just got ridiculous. And I think the government needs to come out, defending the hardworking teachers who's been hounded.
Well, look, I'm gonna leave it there. Andrea, thank you very, very much. And that was Andrea Jenkins there, who is the Conservative MP for Morley and Outwood, talking about two very, very key topics, really. Firstly, the net migration lie, which Nigel Farage is going to be talking about in depth in about 40 minutes' time, live here on this very show. And she also mentioned Just Stop Oil as well, that white van man who got out of his van and decided to take matters into his own hands. The police stepped in there, didn't they? They decided to come down like a ton of bricks on him, pushed him into oncoming traffic as far as we could see, and shouted at him and detained him for a period of time. And we'll be talking to a representative of Just Stop Oil on this show in the next hour as well. And this just ridiculous situation where a primary school teacher or whatever has been sacked because they refuse to use the correct or preferred pronouns of a child. I mean, when you add all of those things together, it does make you wonder what kind of country you're living in, doesn't it? But on that note, Tate Britain has got rid of some of its most popular artwork paintings. Now, visitors get to look at paintings about colonialism and environmental disaster. Good stuff. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion. People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. In the next hour, I will speak to a Just Stop Oil activist after a motorist was detained by police for clashing with protesters. Which side are you on? Are you on the side of the white van man or on the side of Just Stop Oil? I will also be joined by Nigel Farage to talk about the migrant crisis. With last year's net migration figures set to be announced on Thursday, the government have got new plans for students. Are we living in a net migration lie? But I'm sorry to report that Tate Britain, one of the most popular art galleries in the country, has gone all woke. Bosses have replaced some of its popular and classical paintings with more contemporary works around politics, colonialism and climate change. I'm joined now by artist and author Alexander Adams. Alexander, look, thank you very, very much. Do you think that this is actually a fair representation of what's in vogue at the minute, or is it just some kind of desire to go woke and pander to maybe, I don't know, a younger audience or something?
It's certainly in vogue with curators, most of whom now are activist curators. They've come up through universities and they've been taught to advance social justice issues and environmental alarmism and so forth. So this is very much their thinking. I've actually spoken to them in person and this is what they actually believe in. But they're not responding to what the British public wants. They're not responding to what connoisseurs want. They're not even responding to what most artists want.
Yeah, indeed. And there is that famous phrase, isn't there, go woke, go broke. Now, full disclosure, I have been to the Tate. I'm not as uncultured as I sound on this platform every single day. I wasn't blown away by it, and this is where I do sound a bit uncultured. There was a woman there with feathers on her hands, repeatedly just covering her face and coming out. I didn't think that was art. I thought that was a full frontal breakdown. There was also a thing on the floor that was just a bit of rope and a television that turned itself on and off in a massive room repeatedly. So actually, was the bar already quite low at the Tate?
Yes, absolutely. 100%. This is the sort of thing that you have come to expect when you go to these galleries, most of them publicly funded, because if you go to the private sector, this sort of thing is slightly less common. The only way that private sector galleries make their money from art like this is by selling it to public museums and to government departments and so forth. This is completely what you'd expect. It's quite concerning when this actually ends up in the Tate Britain, which is the National Museum of British Art. So there you would expect to go to see all the best art from Britain, historically, from the sort of the Middle Ages through to now. But you're not getting that. What you're getting is a very strong skew towards the recent, the contemporary, the conceptual, and a lot of the art is chosen on the basis of the reproductive organs and the skin colours of artists rather than the merit of...
You mentioned that, and it's a very, very worthwhile point to make, because I'm just going to read a headline here. BLM, Black Lives Matter, moves in under Tate Britain's inclusive rehang. So they've done an inclusive rehang, Alexander. And they want to emphasise the roles of slavery, colonialism, racism. Do people go to art galleries to be lectured about that kind of stuff? Or actually, do they go to see the classics?
Well, they go to the main galleries of Tate Britain to see the classics. There is some value in having the occasional temporary exhibition, which is dedicated to these subjects. But I would say that if you're going to Tate Britain, you really want the very best. You want the classics, you want the canonical artists. And especially if you're a visitor from abroad, imagine coming to London, the capital of Britain. You've only got enough money to come to Britain once. You come here to see the Turners, the Constables, the Sargent Society portraits and so forth. And you're confronted with BLM. It's a terrible thing for art lovers to experience.
And I think you alluded to it a moment ago. If you are a budding artist now, look, we've seen this with things like children's books, for example. We've seen this with TV series that are being pitched across multiple different platforms. There appears to be some kind of push for you have to be making a political point about transgenderism or something similar, anything that's, got a particular flag that can identify with it, or all of this stuff. There seems to be this big push for that kind of thing. Are people maybe not going to get on in the art world if they don't just shamelessly do something about, how we're all going to burn to death with climate change?
Yes, absolutely. This is what is being taught in art schools now. Students are being taught to leverage their life story, their immigrant status, their sexual orientation and so forth, because they know that this sells to organisations which rely on public money. And a lot of these are on the basis of ESG, environmental and social governance legislation, which allows investment banks to put money into various arts organisations and general organisations on the basis of environmental activism, diversity, backing trans rights and so forth. So this is specifically not to do with quality of the work they do, but to do with the politics and not to do with the potential for profit or investment. It's to do with pushing the message.
Alexander, thank you very much. Massively appreciate your time. Chat to you soon. Alexander Adams there, artist, author, just reacting to the Tate, yet again going woke, as it were. Look, big hour coming your way. Just Stop Oil activists protesting again today. I want to know whose side are you on? The white van man who took matters into his own hands, or Just Stop Oil, OK? I'm going to speak to a Just Stop Oil spokesperson in the next hour. I've also got Nigel Farage for you as well. Are we living in a big net migration lie? Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Good evening, everybody. Just gone 5 o'clock. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. This is an absolutely massive hour. I'm going in with Nigel Farage, the man himself, on this migrant chaos. Are we living in the middle of a net migration lie? Is the government fudging the numbers? Have we all been lied to over the net migration figures? And we're talking about that very shortly. And we're going live to the Algarve because, yes, the search continues for Madeleine McCann. 16 years on from her disappearance, Mark White is at the scene of the search for us with any new developments as and when they come in. Will one of the world's greatest missing persons mysteries be solved very, very shortly? Get a load of this as well. I'm going to be talking live on air to a representative from Just Stop Oil. A white van man snapped earlier and took matters into his own hands. The police force decided that he was the one that should be nicked and not actually Just Stop Oil. I want to know whose side are you on, OK? White van man or Just Stop Oil? And finally, as well, we're going to be talking about this. The Cardiff riot took place last night. If you've not seen the images and the videos from this, it's an absolute shocker. We'll be delving into exactly what happened there. Yet another day on Britain's lawless streets. Patrick Christys with you on GB News. GBviews at gbnews.com. It's that new email address, remember? It's not .uk, it's .com. So get your emails coming in thick and fast. Whose side are you on? White Van Man or Just Stop Oil? I'll be talking to a representative shortly. And hold on to your hats, people, because Nigel Farage is pumped up. He's angry about the fact that we've been lied to, in his view, about net migration for far too long. Now, though, it's your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. The top story on GB News this hour, a sex offender who murdered a 7-year-old girl in 1992 has been jailed for life today, with a minimum term to serve in prison of 29 years. 55-year-old David Boyd lured Nikki Allen to a derelict warehouse in Sunderland's East End before stabbing her. He remained at large for over 30 years until he was convicted of murder earlier this month. Northumbria police first prosecuted the wrong man, George Heron. He was cleared after a trial in 1993, and since then, Nikki's mother, Sharon Henderson, has fought to get justice for her daughter.
Satisfied, I would have been satisfied with life. This is a 7-year-old bairn. When's anybody going to talk crimes like this serious?
You're still angry with the police, Sharon?
I am, definitely. They haven't done the jobs properly. And this is what's happening to families like me over and over again. And it's injustice.
Well, in other news today, a former Met police officer accused of failing to properly investigate Wayne Couzens over incidents of indecent exposure has been found guilty of gross misconduct. Samantha Lee was tasked with conducting an inquiry into the incidents in 2021. Couzens had exposed himself to female members of staff at a restaurant in Kent just weeks before he killed Sarah Everard. Samantha Lee was found to be dishonest, claiming the CCTV at the restaurant had been deleted automatically.
There is only one person who's responsible for everything that happened, and that is Wayne Couzens. I have never lied. I don't think it has been a fair investigation from the start when I was declined disclosure and legal advice months after the incident, which were my basic rights for the investigation. I make it clear that nothing more that I could have done would have changed the awful outcome of that day. The panel also found that I could not have changed what happened.
Samantha Lee. Now, the German authorities leading the Madeleine McCann investigation say a major search is underway at a reservoir in Portugal today after a tip-off was received. Dozens of Portuguese police and other specialists are searching in an area 30 miles from where the 3-year-old went missing 16 years ago. And the main suspect, Christian Bruckner, is facing sex offence charges in Germany, was in Portugal around the time Madeleine disappeared in 2007. We'll keep you up to date with the latest developments in that story. Here, 2 teenagers who died in a crash in Cardiff last night have been named locally as Kyrie Sullivan, who was 16, and 15-year-old Harvey Evans. Well, a clean-up operation is still underway and South Wales police are continuing their investigation into the crash. There was violent unrest in the wake of the fatal incident in which police were pelted with missiles, including fireworks, and 2 cars being set on fire. Friends of the boys say they were riding an e-scooter without helmets when they died. Some people had claimed they were being chased by officers at the time. This has been denied by South Wales police. Convicted paedophile Rolf Harris has died at the age of 93. The announcement was made this afternoon, but his death certificate shows he died on the 10th of May. He died of neck cancer and old age. The Australian-born artist and former children's television presenter was a family favourite for decades before he was convicted of 12 indecent assaults in 2014. Downing Street has rejected accusations made by the Labour Party towards the Prime Minister, who accused him of dithering and delaying as he continues to consider whether to order an investigation into the Home Secretary's conduct. Suella Braverman is accused of breaching the ministerial code by asking civil servants to organise a private speed awareness course for her. She maintains nothing untoward took place, but the Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner says there are serious questions to be answered.
As Ministers knows, the Home Secretary has already admitted to breaching the ministerial code by using personal emails to share sensitive government information. So I ask the Minister today, how many strikes before she's out?
The Duke of Sussex has lost his bid to legally challenge the Home Office's decision to block him from paying for police protection whilst he's visiting the UK. Prince Harry had wanted to foot the bill himself after being told he'd no longer receive the same degree of protection as a working royal when visiting the country. The decision comes a week after Harry and Meghan say they were chased through New York at high speed by paparazzi photographers. Well, the Home Office, for its part, says it welcomes the judgment, which it says upholds the integrity of the protective security system. You with GB News, more news as it happens. Back now to Patrick.
OK, massive 5 o'clock hour this, ladies and gentlemen. We start with this incredible story. I'm going to be talking to Just Stop Oil in a matter of moments, OK, because I want to get their reaction to this. A motorist has been detained by police after he challenged Just Stop Oil protesters in central London, So, footage was filmed by Just Stop Oil, which shows a workman pushing one of the protesters off the road on Blackfriars Bridge. Busy road. This guy was in his van, OK, on his way to work, desperate to try to earn £1 out, and then all of a sudden, these numpties are slow walking down the street with a police escort, OK? He shoves one of them out of the way, he goes for a second activist, and then all of a sudden, bingo, there the police are. Oh, they decide to do their job now, do they? And they pin him against a van, they push him into oncoming traffic. 2 police officers wrestled with him and left the protesters alone. Police later said that he was detained for common assault, but that he was not arrested. I am asking you, whose side are you on? GBViews at gbnews.com. White van man or Just Stop Oil? I'm going to be talking to Just Stop Oil shortly. Here we go. Absolutely popping off in the inbox. Well done to the guy who had the nerve to get out of his vehicle. What a hero, says Angela. I'll buy this man a pint. Patrick, get him 2 pints from me. I'm definitely backing the white van man, says Stuart. On and on and on it goes. Be interesting. I'll put some of these views to Just Stop Oil in a matter of moments. But I believe I've got a police statement to read out to you right now. The Met Police's Deputy Assistant Commissioner Lawrence Taylor has released a statement following this morning's incident. It says, I completely understand the frustration and anger of Londoners' communities when protesters walk slowly in the roads and must wonder why we do not just arrest them. Police have legal obligations connected with our response to protest, and we must police peaceful protest in a proportionate manner. Therefore, I urge people not to intervene and to let police deal with the situation. Excuse me, are they dealing with it? Anyway, this morning's incident on Blackfriars Bridge, in which a member of the public assaulted 2 protesters, was unacceptable, and we will deal with anyone who behaves this way. Officers on scene responded proportionately. They detained the man in handcuffs to prevent a further breach of the peace. They took his details, will review evidence and interview the male who was not arrested with a view to further police action as necessary. Are the police on the side of the working man and woman, all those people who decided not to go to work today and instead hold up ordinary individuals desperately trying to earn a living in the middle of a cost of living crisis? I find it absolutely staggering. But moving on to another top story, because I'm going to return to that later, OK? We just stop all, so stay tuned. But on to the latest on Madeleine McCann. This major search is underway at the reservoir on the Algarve after police received a tip-off. Dozens of Portuguese police and other specialists are searching the area. They are down 30 miles from the spot where Madeleine disappeared in 2007. Our GB News Home and Security Editor, Mark White, is with us, I believe. He sent us back this report.
At the edge of the Arad Reservoir, a fire and rescue service, rigid inflatable, was visible at first light, testing the waters for the dive teams who'll spend the next few days in a targeted search of this area. Throughout the morning, dozens of police and other officials arrived at this makeshift staging area for briefings inside these blue tents before being deployed to their search grids. 16 years on from the disappearance of Madeleine McCann in the resort of Praia da Luz, there is still no concrete evidence of what happened to the 3-year-old. But both Portuguese and German police are convinced convicted sex offender Christian Bruckner is the man responsible for her abduction. He's currently serving 7 years in a German prison for the rape of an American tourist in Praia da Luz 2 years before Madeleine's disappearance. About half a mile from the staging area, another group of tents are visible in woodland just back from the shoreline. It was the German authorities who requested this latest search. It's reported that Christian Bruckner used to visit this area around the dam on a regular basis. It's a spot that he was apparently particularly fond of. In fact, he lived just about 7 miles from here for a while in a commune, and Praia de Luz itself is only some 20 miles further down the road. The German authorities have not yet said what's brought them to this area, miles from anywhere. But it is the first major search operation in the Algarve for almost a decade, since the Metropolitan Police asked for a series of digs around the Praia de Luz area in 2014. A small group of Scotland Yard detectives are out here this week as official observers. Of course, there is always intense public interest any time there are developments in this more than a decade and a half long mystery. Madeleine McCann's parents, who've seen many false dawns in this protracted investigation, are being kept informed about the progress of this latest search. Mark White, GB News at the Arad Dam on the Algarve.
We're going to go live now to the scene where this search is taking place with Mark White, who's been there for us all day. Mark, what's the latest where you are?
Well, the very latest is that, you know, the clouds have opened. We've got a thunderstorm. It's been threatening all day, and that may well have an impact now on the search for the rest of the day. I'll just step out of the way again. More interesting than me is to see a shot down towards those forensic tents, which will actually now be right in the heart of that storm as the rain gets a bit more intense here. Dozens of police officers, Patrick, along with these other specialist search teams, have been out throughout the day today. They paused briefly at lunchtime for a rest, obviously, and just a debrief about what they may have found or not found in that search activity. But it's involved ground penetrating radar. They've been putting long poles into the ground as well, prodding the ground. No dive searches as far as we know today. There was a rigid inflatable out there at the start of the day, but that might come later. Although the information that we're really getting from the authorities seems to suggest that they believe the sites of interest are actually on the land there, on that little peninsula that juts out where those forensic tents are, Patrick.
Mark, thank you very, very much. Mark White, our Home and Security editor, who's been stationed right at the scene of this search now. And officers from the UK have joined German police and Portuguese search teams in this huge operation. The Met Police say officers are present so they can inform Madeleine's family if there are any developments. Are we potentially witnessing the culmination of one of the world's most gripping, long-running, most, I suppose, kind of morbidly fascinating missing persons cases that we've ever seen? Joining me now is the former senior investigating officer at the Met, Simon Harding. Simon, look, thank you very, very much. Do you think that this could well be the culmination of this now? The police, although they're not telling us exactly what it is, the German police, they say that this is intelligence-led. It implies something, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think yesterday we didn't know why. It was very, very tight-lipped, and today we see that they are working on intelligence. And I think this is led by the German side of the sort of triad that's in it. You know, the Met are a watching brief. Everyone has a role to play. They are all working closely together, and the sort of Met are, you know, at the forefront of it. But they would all know what the intelligence is. But obviously it's specific, which is obviously something. Is the reason why they're back there, and is probably the most important update we've had for quite a while.
Because we've been led down the garden path, Madeleine's family really have been led down the garden path, haven't they, numerous different times, lots of false dawns. Does this just feel a bit different to you?
Not necessarily. We don't know what the credibility of the tip-off is, for example. So, you know, the German authorities feel that it is that credible that they need to act upon it. So it is something which obviously needs to be done.
Indeed. And look, I've got to ask this really. I mean, clearly, until anything conclusive emerges otherwise, there is still a hope that Madeleine might be alive. Where are you on that? Do you think that there's any chance whatsoever?
Well, I think you always have to hold out chance, don't you? I mean, there's thousands of missing people in this country and even more so, obviously, around the world. And everybody who, you know, unless you have any concrete evidence to suggest that they've come to any harm or they're somewhere else, then you always got to hold out that hope. And the family will, and those that investigate still do as well.
And this reservoir was searched quite soon after Madeleine initially went missing. I believe it was a private investigation. I think a lawyer at the time decided that this was a particular place of interest. It will be absolutely galling for the family if the worst-case scenario happens, Madeleine turns out to be somewhere in this vicinity, to know that this could have been wrapped up years ago.
Well, I think, like you say, that previous time it was searched, and it was searched twice, it was in 2008. And they did find some bones at that time, but they were ruled out.
Right.
And it was privately done. And if you were the police involved in that, or you had that intelligence now, you want to make sure it's done to that standard, not the standard of a private investigation or privately funded search. So things are done very differently. The systems and the processes that the police will put in place will be much more meticulous than what has been done before. And they say 80% is being done on land and 20% in the water. So there's obviously that specific intelligence is suggesting that, you know, there's more information or more evidence to be found on land than there is within the reservoir itself.
There were some initial reports, again, want to emphasise this was unconfirmed, but it was just initial reports this morning about some potential photographs that this person of interest, or suspect really, let's be honest, Christian B or Christian Bruckner, may have had in his possession, and that we understand maybe is one of the reasons behind why they are searching this particular area. We'll have to wait for confirmation on that. But the German authorities, in your capacity, of course, with someone with your massive police experience, you must have had some interaction with German authorities, I imagine, at the time. What are they like? I mean, from what I can gather, they're normally relatively conservative. They are adamant, aren't they, that they believe they've got their guy?
They certainly do, and that's you know, is seen by all the things they say in their own press and their own releases around Christian B. And I think that you know, that information will be supported, if it is obviously true, supported by the UK police and the Portuguese authorities. But they have to persuade the Portuguese to allow them to do these sort of things first, to convince them that they have something which is credible to be allowed to search. So they have to seek authority from the Portuguese because it is their jurisdiction, so to speak.
So clearly, our police, the German police and the Portuguese police have got some reason to believe that there is a credible reason in order to be conducting this search at the moment. Look, thank you very much. Thank you for coming into the studio as well. Simon Harding there, who is, of course, the former senior investigating officer at the Met Police. Like I said, and as you've just seen, Mark White, our Home and Security Editor, is on the scene there of these searches taking place in the Algarve. We will bring you any more information as and when we get it. Loads more on this story and indeed others on our website. Just head to gbnews.com. You will find all of the best analysis of a variety of different topics and strong opinion and, of course, the latest breaking news, gbnews.com. Now, OK, last year's net migration figures will be announced on Thursday. They could top 700,000. Nigel Farage is going to give his view on the migrant crisis, on whether or not we've just been lied to about governments wanting to hit the net migration targets, whether or not we've been lied to about the illegal migration figures, whether or not we've been lied to about the student visas and people bringing dependents over. He will be joining me right here in this studio in just a matter of minutes. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Dubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, the net migration figure for 2022 will be announced on Thursday, and it could top 700,000. And it was only a couple of weeks ago that we reported that the Home Office feared that it could hit 1 million this year, and that, supposedly, is just the ones we know about, isn't it? Is the government ever going to get a grip of the migrant crisis? No, I'll rephrase that. Have we actually been lied to about this from the start? I'm joined now in the studio by Nigel Farage. Nigel, are we living, have we been living a whopping great big migration lie?
Well, I believe so. I mean, David Cameron in 2010 said net migration would reduce to tens of thousands a year. He was told by Steve Hilton, his close advisor, as EU members, that was literally impossible. He was told by other senior civil servants it was unachievable. Oh, well, don't worry, dear boy, it's just a promise, you know, and let's repeat it in 2015 and let's get Theresa May in 2017 to say similar. And then Boris Johnson, and this is really interesting, you know, Nick Timothy, formerly there at the heart of Number 10, saying that when Boris was forced to promise in 2019 that numbers would come down, he told his close ministers not to campaign on the issue because he didn't believe in it. Lies, lies, lies. They've never meant it. They've never believed in it. They've relied on the fact that each fresh promise would bring a new male leader supporting them and fresh hope from their own supporters. Do you know, net migration, since the Conservatives achieved power, depending on what this figure will be on Thursday, will be between 3.5 and 4 million.
Yeah, and the knock-on consequences of that, OK?
Well, do you know something? When the British public make the link between this population explosion caused by government and the lack of housing, the lack of access to GP appointments, then I think at some point in time we're going to get another insurgency, the likes of which we had 10 years ago. I also know that the cynicism inside Number 10 and why Rishi Sunak won't even promise for the number to go below 500,000 when he was on the aeroplane on his way to the G7 in Japan, is they think the public will continue to buy the line, but Labour will be worse.
Yeah.
Here's the point. If the public wake up to the fact they've been lied to and trust is broken, the argument Labour are worse literally melts away into nothing. I think Thursday is going to be a very important day in terms of the public's trust in politicians, and in particular in the Conservative Party.
Do you think that trust breaks fundamentally on Thursday? We will be doing a big migration special on this show. Again, keep your eyes and ears peeled because it is going to be absolutely electric. These net migration figures dropping, potentially illegal migration figures dropping as well. And Nigel, yeah, I just wonder whether Thursday is the day.
I think it's the day the public wake up to the fact they've been lied to. And, you know, it's like anything in life, isn't it? You know, a vote is like a kind of a relationship. When trust in that relationship breaks down, it's incredibly hard to regain and takes a very, very long time. This is a massive week for the public's faith and trust in British politics. And, hey, you got Rishi today saying, we'll stop students being able to bring dependents in. Well, why were they ever allowed to do it in the first place? Why is it you can come into this country on a so-called Australian-style points-based system on 10 grand less than the minimum wage to work in some sectors? They've opened the door up. I've been saying from day one, the policies Boris put in place would increase immigration, not decrease them. Nobody believed me at the time. Now I think they will.
What do you say to all of those people, the usual types out there, potentially on other outlets, who go, well, migration has been and these numbers has been a net benefit to the United Kingdom?
Yes. Only 20% of this number coming out on Thursday will be work permits. 20% will be work permits. Now, I'll admit the figure is skewed this year because we've got Ukrainians coming in and Hong Kongers coming in with a genuine refugee claim. What we've allowed low-skilled labour to come into Britain to settle with dependents, students to come into Britain to settle with dependents. And you've got Gillian Keegan, the Education Minister, wants more of it.
Yeah.
And the Treasury say, isn't it marvellous? We must all bow down to the god of GDP. Our GDP is going up. But if our population's increased by 8 million since 2001, it'd be surprising if our GDP hadn't gone up. But you know something? You want access to housing. You want access to healthcare. You want to drive anywhere on our congested roads. And what's really happening is the quality of life for most families and most people is diminishing.
But you're asked to ignore that. You're being asked to ignore that. And that, I think, is a fundamental part of the lie, where you are demonised if you look around and you say, I feel worse off, I feel as though my quality of life is worse off, I feel as though the general infrastructure in this country is bad, and I feel like we're in a death spiral that's out of control. You get called a racist, you get called every name.
Well, that's the problem. And what's interesting about it is how little opposition there is within the Conservative Party. Occasionally, a red-faced Sir Edward Lee gets up and says, what the hell's going on? But generally, the backbenches are utterly silent on numbers, on figures that were previously unthinkable. And just to remind the audience, between Windrush and the end of the century, a 50-year period, net migration averaged 30,000 a year.
Wow.
We're now looking at figures that are multiple times of that.
Nigel Farage, thank you very, very much. And you'll be on tonight?
I certainly will. 7 o'clock, absolutely.
I can tell he's ready and raring to go. Nigel Farage there, of course, making sure you set your dials for 7 p.m, people. Right, thank you very, very much. Now, from a distance, being a member of a parliament would seem to be an appealing prospect, potentially, to most people. The power, the money, the influence. Yeah, all right. However, Dominic Raab has become the latest high-profile MP to announce he will be standing down at the next general election, saying that he is concerned about the pressure the job has placed on his young family. Let's be honest, he was also hounded out, accused of being a bully, this, that and the other, despite never shouting at anyone, never swearing at anyone and having to put up with a bloke who nearly gave Gibraltar back to the Spanish. Now, I'm joined now by former Conservative MP Neil Parish. Neil, thank you very much. Why on earth would anyone want to be an MP? You don't get paid a huge amount of money. Every single thing you've ever done gets trawled through, and you can't leave your front door without someone mugging you off in the street.
Yeah, slight exaggeration, Patrick, but no, I get...
I'm just going to hold it here because I think, unfortunately, someone pressed the wrong button and we've lost Neil Parish. Neil, you're back with us. Why would anyone want to be an MP?
I was going to say, I think you slightly exaggerated there, Patrick, but I get your drift. It is a case we all go to Parliament to try and make a difference. The problem is now that it's becoming so intrusive on you, your family and everything else. And with Dominic Raab, you see, I mean, he was Deputy Prime Minister under both Boris and under Rishi. He had a good ministerial career. Like you said, he never intended to bully anybody. He wanted to get the job done. And and now he's decided to stand down. Of course, there is a cycle in politics as well, because, of course, the Conservatives are going through the sort of tides beginning to recede. So, you know, those that with seats that are not too safe probably will decide to go. But it's a shame, because I think we want people of all types, all sorts, all walks of life to go into Parliament to make it interesting. Otherwise, we're going to have people there that are going to just be yes men, yes women, and never actually get anything done. That's going to be the problem.
If Dominic Raab wants to get another job, which I presume at some point he does, he should just use the reasons why he had to stand down as Deputy PM or whatever as his job application, because that, to me, was a man who was eminently employable. If you're running a business and you want to get stuff done and you want people whipped into shape, you would employ someone with the attitude of Dominic Raab, as far as I could tell. So I don't think he'll struggle for employment. But I do just wonder, Neil, look, you obviously, you know, fell foul a little bit of it yourself, to be fair. Is there too much scrutiny on our MPs, and does that put some of the best people off?
Yeah, I mean, I think the trouble is it's partly our MPs, you know, of all sides, our own fault. We sort of set ourselves up, if you like, to be something we're not. We're not perfect. We're all people. We're all human. And I think that is the trouble. And I think you will put off quite a few people with a family, put off quite a few high flyers as well, who think, do we actually want the pressure? Do we want the intrusion on us? And it will be a great shame, because I think Parliament is a great institution. And I want to see it work. I want to see, like I said, everybody there that wants to get there, but give them a fair hearing when they're there. And like I said, try not to hound them out, because the trouble is once they release the dogs, there is no, it's like the hound of the basketball. Once you let it out,
but Neil,
after you, basically.
Neil, on that, you know, we're looking at what's happening to Suella Braverman now. This ridiculous situation where she's got some kind of non-avoidance of a parking penalty from more than a year ago, OK, where, as far as we can gather, she's just asked a civil servant whether or not she can do something. They said no, and then she's not done it. And I just wondered, you look at the media, Rishi Sunak was at the G7, we had Peston, we had Rigby, we had Mason, all going at him, well, what are you going to do about your Home Secretary? What are you going to do about your Home Secretary? For goodness sake, I mean, there is more important stuff on, isn't there? It's the media to blame for good people not going into politics. And then the media bask about how naff our politicians are.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes I say, you know, the media get the politicians they deserve, and by that I mean, you know, they hound them, and then it's only the tough ones, and perhaps sometimes the ones that perhaps shouldn't be there, that hang on in there. I mean, Suella Braverman, I mean, she speeded. I mean, I've speeded. I expect you may have speeded, dare I say it, Patrick. You know, I mean, it is not the end of the world, and she, you know, she took the points and what have you. I mean, her mistake was, of course, to ask anybody about it, because the trouble is nothing seems to be secure anymore. And I think what ministers would like to be able to do is actually have a discussion with their civil servants that doesn't actually land up in the public domain. And I think that's what's putting a lot of people off, you know, because you work well with your civil servants. If you can actually trust them, they trust you, it works very well. But the moment that breaks down, then it becomes a problem.
Neil, thank you very much for your time, as ever. Neil Parish, their former Conservative MP. I just think it's becoming impossible, really. If you want to be a quote-unquote conservative politician in this country who's trying to act on your manifesto, it appears there's a very thin layer of people like you and then a very fat layer of people who don't want you to do your job. But loads more still to come between now and 6 p.m. If you've been... Sorry, I've been promising you. There we go. It all show. And in a few minutes, I will, if I can get my words out, be going head-to-head with a Just Stop Oil activist. And really, it's just about this, OK? This is a workman being detained by police this morning for shoving a protester out of the way. I was asking, whose side are you on? The white van man or Just Stop Oil? I'll be talking to someone from Just Stop Oil shortly. And we'll get an eyewitness account of the riot in Cardiff last night. Youths clashed with police following a fatal crash. But right now, it's your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this hour. A sex offender who murdered a 7-year-old girl in 1992 has been jailed for life today with a minimum term to serve of 29 years in prison. 55-year-old David Boyd lured little Nikki Allen to a derelict warehouse in Sunderland's East End before stabbing her. He remained at large for over 30 years until he was convicted of murder earlier this month. Nikki's mother, Sharon Henderson, has fought since then for justice for her daughter.
Satisfied, I would have been satisfied with life. This is a 7-year-old bairn. When's anybody going to take crimes like is serious.
You still angry with the police, Sharon?
I am, definitely. They haven't done the jobs properly. And this is what's happening to families like me over and over again. And it's injustice.
A former Met Police officer accused of failing to properly investigate Wayne Couzens over incidents of indecent exposure has been found guilty of gross misconduct. Samantha Lee was tasked with conducting an inquiry into the incidents which took place in 2021, when Couzens had exposed himself to female members of staff at a restaurant in Kent just weeks before he killed Sarah Everard. Samantha Lee was found to be dishonest, having claimed the CCTV at the restaurant had been automatically deleted. And the German authorities leading the Madeleine McCann investigation say a major search is underway at a reservoir in Portugal after a tip-off was received. Dozens of Portuguese police officers and specialists are searching an area 30 miles from where the 3-year-old went missing 16 years ago. The main suspect is facing sex offence charges in Germany and was in Portugal around the time Madeleine disappeared while on holiday with her family. You can get more on all those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Let's bring you a quick snapshot then of today's markets. The pound buying you $1.2408 and €1.1528. The price of gold is £1,586.81 an ounce. And the FTSE 100 closed today in London at 7,762 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Let's get more on our top story. A motorist was detained by police after he challenged Just Stop Oil protesters in central London. Footage, which we're playing for you now if you're watching on TV or online, filmed by Just Stop Oil, shows a workman pushing one of the protesters off the road at Blackfriars Bridge. Apparently, he got out of his white van and gave them a shove. Then, of course, when he tried to do the same to a second activist, police intervened. 2 police officers wrestled with the man while leaving the protesters alone. Police has later said that he was detained for common assault. He was not arrested. Police are investigating the incident. Now, in the last hour, I caught up with Charlie Mullins, who's the founder of Pimlico Plumbers, a kind of working-class hero, really, because this is who it's affecting, isn't it? The working class, these Just Stop Oil protests and slow walks. Here's what he had to say.
For. I mean, he's not actually breaking the law. He's actually moving them out of the way. It's the protesters that are breaking the law. And yet the police seem to be on the opposite side. You know, they're sort of getting onto people that are trying to go to what, as you say, proper working-class fella. Everybody's had enough of it. Everybody's getting off with it now. Yeah. And something needs to be done about it. And how much longer can it go on before someone's really going to get hurt in this?
Well, look, I was asking you, ladies and gentlemen, to email in gbviews@gbnews.com about whose side are you on here? Is it Just Stop Oil or was it White Van Man? And White Van Man has won a resounding victory. But I am joined now by spokesperson for Just Stop Oil, Sam Johnson. Sam, look, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. I've got to ask, given that China has released more carbon dioxide in the last 8 years than the UK since the Industrial Revolution, why don't you go and bother the working class people in China?
Well, thank you, Patrick, for having me on. Yeah, you do have an obsession with China. If I went to China and said, can you get your house in order, they would probably say to me, I'm from the UK, go back home and tell the UK government to get their house in order. And that's what we're doing. No new oil is
You're
the most
scared, aren't you?
basic demand.
Are you not? Is the reality not that you're scared of the Chinese authorities? You're more scared of them than you are of the British police, who will give you an escort down the street as you hold up people and cost ordinary working men and women their livelihoods in the middle of a cost of living crisis. You're too scared to go to China, aren't you?
Patrick, you say it's a cost of living crisis. It's a cost of greed crisis. And you tried to make this divide between myself and these people on the streets. I am a construction worker. I am an ordinary person. I'm common. I'm a commoner. So basically, you're trying to have this divide.
How do you feel then about directly impacting your own people like that?
The divide between the 1% that are controlling government policy and the production of fossil fuels and the continuation of this status quo business as usual model that's could cause a catastrophe, could cause a catastrophe, and everyone else. Unless you're in that 1%, we're all together. We're all together in this climate crisis.
So why don't you just go after? Why don't you just go after the 1%? Why are you going after the people in their white vans, the ordinary people who have to go out and earn a living, maybe even day to day, to put food on the table for their families? Do you understand the kind of orange wall of entitlement that is parading around the streets of London at the moment from people who clearly don't have to work for a living, or maybe on the dole anyway, who are holding up people like that particular chap there? And frankly, you're doing more to turn the ordinary people away from your cause than you are to actually turn them towards it. I mean, why don't you just go after the 1%?
We have. When we started, we went directly to the oil companies and we got pretty much a media blanket ban. I completely understand the frustration of the public and say the gentleman involved. He's justifiably right to be angry. But ultimately, you've got to ask, where should his anger be? Should his anger be at like teachers and nurses and doctors and healthcare workers and people that are out on the streets demanding the most basic thing? The United Nations said there can be no new oil. The Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change says no new oil.
Yeah.
Even the International Energy Agency is saying no new oil. And that was 2 years ago. And the government is hell-bent on this reckless course.
You guys are obviously...
This week,
you guys are obviously not going to stop,
in northern Italy, they had half of their average rainfall in 36 hours. That resulted... This is really important, because you talk about disruption. That resulted in 14 people losing their lives and 36,000 people becoming homeless like that. 36,000 people, that's a football stadium.
And the problem is, Sam, though, the problem is that even if we did absolutely everything that you guys wanted us to do, unless countries, and I'm going to use that buzzword to you again now, China, unless countries like China do something as well, it doesn't really matter, does it? And instead of you holding up the working class, I tell you what, can I make you an offer, all right? I've got a thing in front of me here. You can get the train to China, so you won't have to fly, right? If I bought your train ticket to China, would you and a load of your Just Stop Oil lot go there and protest over there?
Patrick, as soon as the UK government halts all new future oil licenses, I would more than happily go to China. I will
So you're turning down the opportunity to do that, are you?
We need to do it in the UK. We need to go to China as a UK citizen. Say,
but think about the global possibilities for your cause, Sam. Sam, think about the global possibilities for your cause. At the minute, you know, you're a household name in your own home, just about, mate, but you're not international. Just Stop Oil. The Chinese have never heard of you. If you want to make real change, go over there. It would be an international incident, the likes of which most PR firms could only dream of, Sam. If you went to Beijing, caused a scene and got nicked.
Patrick, to bring it back home if we can. This week...
Oh, I don't want to bring it back home. I want you to answer my question. Why are you refusing to go to China?
Well, Patrick, let me say this is important. Your viewers would need to hear this, because it's like £33 billion in Shell made in profit last year. That's an absolutely ridiculous amount of money. You can't compute how much it is. In terms, that would actually be enough to pay half of all the energy bills for every single person in the UK. Obviously, Shell aren't doing that. At the moment, Shell are still being subsidised £236 million a week of UK taxpayers' money. Do you think that's right?
It's not my job to think whether or not it's right. I'll tell you what I don't think is right, Sam. I'll tell you what I don't think is right, that the ordinary man and woman in this country right now have to sit there behind an orange wall of people who, again, we don't really know a lot about who they are. I mean, it doesn't seem like the most racially diverse group, by the way, Sam. It all seems to be pretty stuffy, well-to-do white people who are trundling along, who are possibly already financially comfortable enough to not bother having to go to work. Sam, are you not
Patrick,
are you not maybe doing a little bit of a disservice to some of your own members here who don't realise the kind of risk that they're in? Is it not only a matter of time before one of your lot gets seriously hurt?
I have to bring you back there, obviously, because you're sort of painting us as a sort of privileged, elitist sort of group. I mean, people can come and join us. Go to justopoil.org and join us, or come to Parliament midday every Saturday and come and see what we're about, because the media are painting us as something we're not. And people on the street are supporting us. Obviously, not everyone, because it's disruptive action. So it is destructive in its own being, but people are supporting it because they know the cause.
Just to summarise, because I've got to go in a second, you know, I'm giving you this option now. I will happily pay your train fare to get to China so you can go and protest at the source of one of the world's leading polluters, a country that has done more pollution in the last 8 years than we've done since the Industrial Revolution. And you are turning that offer down, or you're going to go and parade through somewhere like Muswell Hill?
I'll accept the offer the moment UK halts new oil and gas. I'll go
right, so no, basically, because he's scared.
You have my word on that. We have to make a choice now. Everyone has to make a choice.
Okay.
You can't sit on the fence when the fence is on fire, Patrick.
Well,
you know that.
There's a big fiery fence in Beijing that you can go and sit on if you want, mate. Sam, thank you very much. Sam Johnson there is the spokesperson for Just Stop Oil. Right, get your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.com. Moving on. Police officers were injured and cars were set on fire as youths rioted in Cardiff last night. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Yeah, now to the riots in Cardiff last night, and police have confirmed they've received CCTV footage which appears to show a police car following 2 boys on an electric bike shortly before it was involved in a fatal collision. The crash sparked the disturbances, the riots, and earlier today the police commissioner said there was no police chase in the run-up to the crash. South Wales police have now referred themselves to the police watchdog. I am joined now by a mother of children who were very close to the riots last night, and Nicola Masters joins me now to tell us what she saw, I believe. Nicola, thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming on. Look, I'm going to throw this over to you. What did you see last night, then?
Well, just the devastation, the total devastation and the unnecessary violence that occurred. We are talking about parents have lost 2 young teenagers, and this was violence for the sake of violence. I get there were some issues and there are some stories going around about the fact that police were involved, and I cannot confirm or deny that. However, these parents now have to live with their grief that surrounds this violence. I mean, who wants to do that when you're already struggling to grieve for the loss of your child?
I mean, did you feel quite threatened? Were you shocked? I can obviously see you've got a couple of children there with you. I mean, what was it like for you as a family, really, when you were seeing things like cars being set on fire and just wanton violence like that?
Extremely frightening. My son and my nephew and his friends, his friends actually live in the street. He has 5 friends and he was visiting his friends, and he was unable to leave the area. And I was so frightened that he was going to get hurt, worse even, or even pulled in as an unnecessary victim or accessory to this violence. It was just one of the most frightening experiences that I've ever had. I was constantly on the phone to him, trying to get him home, and the police would not allow him to leave the area. So very frightening.
It sounds like you and your family were having a pretty normal evening, and then all of a sudden where you live just turned into a war zone.
It did. It did. Now, that doesn't represent the community of Ely, though. The community of Ely are community heroes. You know, we support each other. There are football teams in the community that help the youth. There are youth teams that help the youth. There are parishioners and church ministries that... we have an amazing community of Ely, but this does not represent us, you know, and to have that happen in our area, I think is devastating for the whole of the community.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's all right. We'll leave it there, I think. But thank you very, very much. Nicola Masters there, who saw the riots last night. Right, look, unfortunately, we are bang out of time, I'm afraid, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so sorry, but Michelle Juby will join you next with Jubes and Co. So make sure you stay tuned.
Hello, my name's Rachel Ayres, and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast, brought to you by the Met Office. So it's quite settled over the weekend, and the start of this week has remained that way. And this is all due to this area of high pressure that's just to the west of the UK. But as we go through the next couple of days, weather fronts will just try to push their way in from the northwest. And this will just bring a slight tightening of those isobars, so slightly stronger winds across northern parts of Scotland for a time. And we might see some cloud and rain here through this evening as well. Elsewhere, skies will clear throughout tonight, so plenty of clearer spells around, which will just help those temperatures drop a little bit here, especially in some rural areas. But across Northern Ireland and northern and western parts of Scotland, with a bit more in the way of cloud, temperatures will just remain in the double figures. Now, as we go through into the start of Wednesday, with those clearer skies overnight, it'll be a bright and fine start for much of England and Wales. Though looking further north, we've got this band of cloud and rain that's going to sink southeastwards through the day on Wednesday across Scotland, bringing some light outbreaks of rain, but most noticeably a bit more in the way of cloud. So less in the way of sunshine here, but across much of England and Wales, a fine, dry and bright day with plenty of sunshine. Now, as we go into Wednesday evening, that band of cloud is going to sink southeastwards, bringing a bit of cloud overnight for eastern parts of England and Wales, as well as some central areas. So temperatures not dropping quite so readily into Thursday morning here. But across Northern Ireland and Scotland, clearer skies into Thursday morning, so a bit of a chillier start to the day here, as well as across Western Wales and southwest England. So as we go into the start of Thursday, a cloudier day further east, but that will start to break up into the latter part of the morning. Away from that, across northern and western areas, another dry day and plenty of sunshine once again. And that will continue as we go through the rest of the week and into the weekend, with temperatures starting to climb in the south too.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's